All right. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Because today is 9/11, I would like to take just a few moments in silence in memory of those who we lost 23 years ago. So, just a few seconds of silence in memory. Okay. Today is class 2, and we're going to cover a lot of information today. Probably the most important thing that we're going to cover today is gloves. And I'm going to challenge some of your, good morning. I'm going to challenge some of your thoughts and beliefs regarding glove use. So today's kind of a hard day for you guys because what you think you know and what I need you to know are usually not the same thing. So today might be a little bit challenging for you. Before I get grades, I've got a couple comments on here that I want to talk about. So the first comment is from Alexis, who says, "Hi, Miss Patty. I passed my exam last week. Thank you for your videos. Keep up the good work. Both your questions and videos are so informative, and I'm in New York. So congratulations to you." And Alexis got range of motion shoulder, perineal care, and pulse. So we're actually going to be learning one of those today. We're going to be learning how to take a pulse today. So great job, Alexis. Mocha says, "Hello, Miss Patty. Thank you so much for these live streams. I have a CNA prep book to study." Well, welcome, Mocha. I'm glad that you're finding this helpful. All right. So between Monday and today, you guys read chapter 1 in the yellow book, or that's what was assigned. Whether you got to it or not, that's okay. Just remember, 4 weeks goes by really quick. So if you get behind, it may be a little bit challenging to get caught up in the time that we have because you've got reading every single night. So kind of keep that in mind. But when I call your name out later for your grades, if you didn't get to it, it's not a big deal. Just say pass. And I'll ask you again next class. Okay. I'm not that kind of a teacher. I understand everybody has lives outside of this room, and lives can be very challenging to work around. I get it. So just say pass when I call your name. So you read chapter 1 in the yellow book. You did the test on page 181 in your white book, and you graded it using page 201. Did everybody grade it? Okay, go ahead and take a moment. Good morning. Go ahead and take a moment and grade. Those of you who took the test on page 181, please go ahead and grade it using the answer key on page 201. You don't need it. It's okay. So the test is on page 181 of that book. Oh. Yeah, 181. 181. I know it's a lot. The first day I shoved so much information at you guys. I know. You probably went home and was like, whoa, what did I get myself into? All right. So take a moment, if you haven't, to grade the test from page 181 using the answer key on page 201. So your test is page 181. Answer key is on 201. So go ahead and take a moment to grade it. Good morning, Raz. Go ahead and take a moment to grade it. I can read these out to you if you want. You want me to read them out? 1 is B, like boy. 2 is C, like cat. 3 is D, like dog. 4 is D, like dog. 5 is C, like cat. 6 is A. 7 is B, like boy. 8 is A. 9 is B, like boy. 10 is A. 11. You guys ready? 11 is D, like dog. 12 is G, like good. 13 is F, like Fred. 14 is C, like cat. 15 is I, like ice cream. 16 is J, like judge. 17 is B, like boy. 18 is H, like hotel. 19 is E, like echo. And 20 is A. Okay, good. When I call your name, if you can tell me how many you got wrong, and I'll do the score for you, okay? Just tell me how many you got wrong. If you didn't do it, no worries. Just say pass. Okay. Ada. Is Ada here? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you didn't get to it. That's fine. Just say pass. Zumarinda? Zumarinda here? Elvira? Okay, it's fine. Robin? Robin here? Samantha? Very good. Janaya? 2? Thank you. Good morning. Catherine? Thank you. Jihu? Okay, very good. Paula? 2? Thank you. Kaylee? Thank you. Brianna? Oh, okay. I'm getting the scores from your test on page 181. Did you get to do it? Yeah. Did you grade it? Okay. Yeah, there's an answer key on page 201. No big deal. I'll come back to you in a few minutes. Luz? Kiara? Thank you. Tamika? Thank you. Jody? Thank you. Abigail? Abigail here? No. Cheyenne, if you are on the live stream, if you can put your score in the chat, I'll record it. If you didn't get to it, no big deal. I'll get it from you next week. Okay. All right. Any questions on anything you got wrong? Anything you need me to explain to you? Did you get a question wrong and you weren't real sure why you got it wrong, why your answer wasn't right? Do you guys want to talk about any of the questions? Can somebody, I don't have a book with me. Can somebody read number 1 to me?
What's an example of neglect?
Oh, yeah, this one gets missed a lot. Yeah. So there is a difference between neglect and abuse. We tend to group them together, right? But there is a difference. And the difference is actually pretty simple. Not doing something that you should do is neglect. Doing something that you shouldn't do is abuse. So neglect would be not feeding a patient or not keeping a patient clean or not making sure the patient was safe and in the middle of the bed at all times. That's neglect. It's not doing something that you should do. Abuse is doing something you shouldn't do. So like hitting a patient, slapping a patient, punishing a patient, locking them in their rooms, right? Those are all examples of abuse. So abuse, I always think A and A. Abuse is an action. Neglect is a non-action. So NNAA. Abuse is an action. Neglect is a non-action. Good? Make sense? Now, you're not going to have a question on the state exam like that. They're not going to ask you, what is an example of neglect? What is an example of abuse? What's the difference between abuse and neglect? They don't ask questions like that. They give you scenarios. So they would say something like, you're caring for a patient who you need to change their sheets. And during that skill, the patient falls onto the floor. What is this an example of? Now, that would be neglect because you neglected to keep them safe. Okay. Does that make sense? So the questions are going to be more scenario based. In most cases, they're not even going to ask you what is neglect. They would ask you, what should you have done? right? Keeping the patient in the middle of the bed, always a good idea, right? So, but you need to know a little bit about abuse and neglect so we know what to avoid when we're caring for our patients. And we're going to go over that a little bit here and there as I weave patient rights into all the skills so we understand how they apply to what we do. Okay? Any other questions on your reading? No other questions? Tonight, you have 2 chapters. So, but you have all weekend to get them done. And they're long. Oh, they're long. And they're boring. Oh, they're boring. So my advice to you, don't try to do it all at once. Thanksgiving is coming up, right? Couple months. Thanksgiving is the day that you eat until you can't eat anymore, right? And then you got to go away from the table and let stuff kind of digest before you can go in for pie, right? Because there's just no room, right? So think of homework like that. When you read, you can only read so much, and then you have to digest that before you can read more. So studying really should be done in about 10 to 15 minute periods. So you should read for 10 or 15 minutes and then go do something mindless. Go walk the dog, go play with the kids outside, go do your dishes, go fold some laundry. Do something that doesn't take a lot of thought process, a lot of brain power, and that frees your mind up to catalog what it just read and put it into storage. Then you can go back and read for another 10 or 15 minutes. If you keep doing that, if you break your study down into small pieces, you'll find that you retain a whole lot more. Have you ever read a page, and then realized, I have no idea what I just read? Yeah, that's because your brain isn't engaged. Reading for the sake of reading isn't going to get you anywhere. We need to read to comprehend. Good? So that's the best advice I can give you about your homework this weekend, chapters 2 and 3. They're long. Nothing I can do about that. All right. So let's review what we learned on Monday. How do we know what to do with each patient? The care plan. And we follow not just the care plan, it's the whole care plan and nothing but the care plan. And what that means is we can't add to it. We can't change it. We can't take away from it. Now, that's important when it comes to the test. Because when you're taking that written test, if your brain goes, well, if, and then it'll lead you to the wrong answer. If the patient could get out of bed, if the patient is a fall risk, if the patient has swallowing difficulties, if you're adding something to the question, if your brain says, but if, that is not the question. It's going to lead you to the wrong answer. Because if it was part of the question, it would actually be in the question. So that saying, the care plan, the whole care plan, and nothing but the care plan is going to help you when you take the written exam. Don't add those, well, if statements to the test. Good? Good. I have trained in this classroom about 5,000 students. Most of them come back to me and told me about their testing experience. Online, I've trained probably closer to about 1 million. And a lot of them tell me as well. And it's funny because you guys all say the same thing. I heard your voice in my head when I was testing. And it's because I say the same things over and over. And I do it in different ways, but I'm saying the same thing so that it kind of worms its way into your brain and you will remember it on the state exam. This is not the last time we're going to review this. In fact, over the next 3 class sessions, you're going to see this again and again and again. By the time we get to the last review, you're like, all right, I got it. Enough. But it's important because that's what's going to help you get through that test. But more importantly, it's going to help you when you're out there working. Because it's not really about the test, is it? The test is one day of your life. You're spending all this time preparing for one day of your life. What you really should be doing is preparing for what comes after that. If you start preparing for your work, the test takes care of itself. Good? Okay. So we're going to perform the skills as directed on the care plan. We're going to follow the care plan, the whole care plan, and nothing but the care plan. But while we're doing that, what should we also be doing? What should we be making? Observations. Yeah, we should be looking at the patient, listening to the patient, using all of our senses to see, is there something here going on that I need to report to the nurse? Now, we are going to use all of our senses here, except for taste. Don't taste your patient. But we are going to use sight, right? Does the patient look pale or sweaty? Do they look like they aren't feeling well? Can I see them throwing up in the corner, right? We're going to use our sight. That's the one we most focus on, is sight. How does the patient look? But we also want to pay attention to what we hear. Now, what the patient tells us is obviously something that we hear, yes, but we can also hear other things, like the sound of the patient's breathing or gurgling very loudly in their tummy, or things that they say to their family or their roommate. So sometimes that hearing may not come directly at us. We're using it in more of a kind of an external way of gathering information. Good? Makes sense? You are also going to use smell to tell you information about the patient. Now, this is somewhat obvious, obviously, but it kind of goes beyond body functions. And let me give you one of the most interesting ones for me, okay? If you walk into a patient's room and it smells like grape Kool-Aid, and you look around, you don't see any grape Kool-Aid, that is something you need to report to the nurse right now. Like, don't wait. Because that smell of grape Kool-Aid can indicate a Pseudomonas infection, a specific bacteria that this type of infection can degrade the patient super quick. And when a Pseudomonas infection takes hold, a lot of times it will smell like grape Kool-Aid. So things that you wouldn't think about, we have to pay attention to. Everything we notice, no matter how minor it seems to us, if your brain goes, it should be reported to the nurse. If your brain goes, that's weird, it should be reported to the nurse. If your brain goes, I don't know if that matters, it should be reported to the nurse. Good? Does that make sense? So while we're there doing the skills that are on the care plan, we're going to make observations. And remember, this is half of our job. This is what sets us apart from everybody else, is the ability to make observations and report them to the nurse. So this is half of our job. It's super important. Once we make those observations, obviously, we're going to report them to the nurse. Yeah. So Alexis is agreeing with me. You were in my head while I tested, saying this is what Miss Patty would do. I tested in New York. Also, the free ebook on how to do the written exam helps a lot. Glad I spared the time to read it. Well, I'm glad that helped you, Alexis. Yep, you'll hear me in your head. All right. So that is skill rules. We also learned the opening. Now, the opening is how we begin every single skill that we're going to do. Every skill starts with the opening. What does every opening start with? A knock. And that's important for patient rights. So we have to remember to knock. And yes, you have to knock for the test on something. Got to knock. So the first thing we're going to do is knock. Then who are we going to greet? The patient. It's all about the patient. But it's not just enough to say good morning or Hi. We have to address them by name, and they need to hear that on the state exam. You actually have to say, "Good morning, Mrs. Jones," or "Hello, Mrs. Jones." They need to hear that name. If you don't identify your patient by name, that line that you're now getting a deficiency on has 3 things on it. So it's going to count big. Okay? Make sense? Okay. So we're going to greet them and address them by name. Now what do they need to know? Yeah, your name and title. You can't just walk in and say, "Hey, I'm Patty." So, "I'm Patty, your CNA today." Now, there's a big controversy online. I told you I'm plugged into a whole bunch of groups, right? Big controversy online. Well, if they think I'm a nurse, I don't bother to correct them. That's scary territory. Because who has liability? The nurse. And if you're pretending to be the nurse, who has liability? You. That is correct. Not to mention the fact that it's actually illegal. There's actually a state statute that makes it illegal. But be careful about that. You want the patient to clearly know who you are. So be very careful about not correcting somebody if they mistakenly think that you're a nurse. I wouldn't want to be in that position, not knowing everything the nurse knows about the patient, but having to assume the liability for my actions. That's kind of a scary place to be. But, if you don't like your house. All right. Once we've got all that out of the way, what are we going to describe to them? The skill, what we're there to do. Now, this can be done in any way you want to do it. You can say, "I'm here to get you cleaned up for the day. I'm here to brush your teeth." If you are a little shy and not real sure what to say, or if English isn't your first language, you might want to read this right off the care plan. "I am here to provide mouth care to a resident with teeth." You can say this any way you want to, as long as you're describing the skill and the patient understands what you're planning on doing. Because once we describe that skill, what do we need to get from them? Permission or consent. If they don't understand what you're doing, they can't give consent. And remember, patients have the right to say no. If they say no, we have to respect that. Now, there is a difference with dementia patients, yes. Dementia patients don't really have the ability to understand what we're doing. They're cognitively impaired. So with dementia patients, we don't give them yes/no questions. You should never give a dementia patient a yes/no question. With dementia patients, we're going to pose the question as a choice. Would you like to have hand care done now or after lunch? Okay. So limited choice. Now let me explain why. Anybody ever see 2-year-olds? These are probably my favorite creatures on the planet. 2-year-olds. Love them. They're awesome. Now we call them the terrible twos. Anybody know why we call them the terrible twos? Okay, say it loud. Say it louder. Crazy. They don't listen. Temper tantrums, right? Right? They don't do what we want them to do. Because at 2 years old, you start to realize that I am a separate person, separate from everybody else, and I have rights. I have a brain that thinks. And they start exercising that autonomy with one word. Anybody know what that word is? No, that's correct. No. If you ask a 2-year-old, "Can you put your shoes on?" You know what they'll say? No. "Will you eat your peas, please?" No. Right? They say no to everything. It's not because they're trying to be difficult or contrary. This is actually a very important part of their emotional development. This is why I love 2-year-olds, because you can actually watch the independence form. Now, that's going to be important because can you imagine A fully grown adult that has no independence and has to rely on everybody else to do their thinking for them, right? That person is going to be manipulated pretty quickly. So this is actually a huge milestone. So we learned this at 2. Okay, everybody got that? We learned this at 2. Now, at what age are you willing to give up your rights to make your own decisions? At what age? Anybody think it should be 80? 60? 40? 18? When are you willing to give up your rights? Never. Never. That's correct. You have rights that you formed when you were 2, and you're not willing to give them up. Now, why do we think our patients are? So the problem with dementia is that they no longer have the ability or the right to make their own decisions, just like that 2-year-old. So do you know what their favorite word is going to be? No. Because they're trying to exercise autonomy, just like you do when you're 2. So when we're working with dementia patients, we don't want to ask them yes, no questions. You'll always get a no. What you want to give them is limited choice. So that makes them feel like they have a choice. Does that make sense? You'll get a lot further with dementia patients. But for the test, we don't have dementia patients. We have you, because you're going to be a patient for the test. And if you remember on Monday, I said for the test, you have to be pleasant, cooperative, and yourself. So you're not going to say no for the test. You're not going to have dementia for the test. So somebody's going to ask you when you're a patient, can I do this? And what are you going to say? Yes. Good? Make sense? All right. So we're going to obtain permission. Now, those of you who are practicing on people at home, if you got any live people laying around that you're going to practice on, make sure they understand this, that for the test, your patient is going to say yes. Because your people at home, they will automatically try to make this hard on you. They think they're helping. They're not. They're not. So when you go home and you say, hey, I need to practice a skill I learned in class today, but my teacher said that you have to be pleasant, cooperative, and you. Okay? Otherwise, they will try to derail you. And that doesn't help you because it has nothing to do with the test. It's not how the test is going to be structured. It doesn't help. It's like handing a kindergartner a trigonometry exam, saying, here you go. Right? You're not there yet. All right. So once we've obtained permission, we want to close the curtain. Is that curtain clean? Who touches it? Everyone. So what do you want to do after you touch that curtain? Right. We want to get rid of those cooties by washing our hands. And then once we've washed our hands, we're going to go get the supplies that we need to perform the skill. Why can't I get those supplies before I wash my hands? Okay, supplies are clean and your hands are, not. Right. So this trips so many people up on the test. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I have seen this on the test. You'll get your care plan, you'll read it, and then you'll go in and grab your supplies before you ever talk to the patient. Now, 2 things there. Number 1, you've touched those supplies before you wash your hands. That's a big no-no. That's an infection control nightmare. But number 2, you never gave the patient a chance to say no. When you walk in with all the supplies, it presupposes to your patient that you're going to do whatever it is that you came there to do. It takes the element of choice away. And your patients will react to that, and usually in a very negative way. So if you want a good relationship with your patient, make them a partner in their care. not a byproduct. Okay? All right. So our cardinal rule here is that we don't touch the patient until our hands are clean. That's right. Remember, this patient is in a pathogen-rich environment. Pathogen-rich environment. And they're already fighting something. So if we bring pathogens to them, it could absolutely take them out of the game. 100%. And then we learn to do the closing. Now, the opening is done at the beginning of every skill. The closing is done at the end of every skill. There's 8 C's to the closing. We don't care what order they're done in except for the last 2. Can somebody tell me one thing that we need to do with this patient as far as their environment? What do we need to make sure in their environment? It's clean. That's right, because patients rest better when they're in a clean, orderly environment. Now, a lot of CNAs fight this one. It's not my job to do housekeeping's job. No, a clean, orderly environment is your job. That is your responsibility. Now, housekeeping is going to help you by taking out the trash, by mopping, by cleaning the bathrooms. We should be thankful for housekeeping because if they weren't there, that would all be our job. Okay, so keeping the patient's environment clean is a CNA task. Good. What position does a bed need to be in? The lowest. Why? Are we afraid they're going to roll out of bed? Yeah, so the floor doesn't move. That's right. When they get out of bed, they expect the floor to be there. If it's not there, they're going to fall. So this is a fall risk. What do we need to ask them? What word do we need to say? Are you comfortable? Yeah, and we're going to go a step further and address emotional comfort as well through preferences. So do you want the head of the bed up? Do you want a magazine? You know, we want to address their preferences. If they're in bed and they're undressed, we need to make sure they're covered. So I call this the no knobby knees. Okay, I should never see a patient's knobby knees. Nope. And the reason for that, let's think about this for a second. Let's think about this patient. Okay. Is she home? Where does she want to be? Home. Right. Is she surrounded by people that she knows and loves? Who's she surrounded by? Strangers. Is she fully dressed and open for company? No. What is she wearing? Hospital gown. Probably not much else. Is she standing up and able to defend herself? What position is she in? Okay, so all of that together, the fact that she is in an unfamiliar environment, surrounded by strangers, underdressed and in a vulnerable position. Can you start to think about how she feels? Now, take her sheet away. How exposed do you think she feels? Yeah, and probably at risk because there is no guarantee that the guy on the other side of that wall isn't a sexual predator. Because you know what? Those people also get sick and go to the hospital. So should we see her knobby knees? She needs to be covered if she's in bed. It provides some small amount of psychological safety. Does that make sense? Okay. So make sure they're covered if they're in bed. We're going to open that privacy curtain. And then we're going to give them the call light. Now, when I give somebody a call light, I also tell them how to use it. If you need me, press the red button. Because they're probably medicated. We know they're sleep deprived. We know that they're concentrating on other things. So they may not know how to call me using this contraption. So I always make sure I tell them, if you need me, press the red button. above all, if you don't take anything else out of here, do not ever hide a call light. Ever. Now, this is happening like all over the place. I've seen way more TikToks lately about CNAs that are hiding call lights because the patients are difficult. They're always on the call lights. I've got to get stuff done. So they put the call light on the floor, under the bed. They'll put it under the mattress. They'll do all kinds of stuff so that the patient can't reach that call light. Do you know where the worst place in the world to have a heart attack is? Do you know the worst place in the world to have a heart attack? Nope. Say it louder. The hospital. As a patient in the hospital, worst place in the world to have a heart attack. Yep. And that's because we assume that every call light that goes off is somebody that wants water or needs to go to the bathroom. When you are in an emergency situation and you hit that call light and nobody comes, you're surrounded. You're in the one place you're supposed to be in. You're surrounded by medical professionals who are actively ignoring you. Happens way more than you think. Now, it's even worse if you're having a medical emergency and you can't call for help. How emotionally stressful do you think that is? So don't ever hide call lights. The patient needs to have the call light and have the ability to use it. This is a trend that's just very upsetting to me. Once we've done all of those things, so clean and safe environment, comfort, address their preferences, make sure they're covered, give them their call light, open the curtain. You've done all of those things. Now we want to get those cooties off of our hands, so we're going to go clean our hands. Once we've cleaned our hands, should we come back to this patient and take care of anything? No, if we have to, what do we have to do? Wash our hands again. That's right. But once you've washed your hands and you're all done with the patient, then you can document, because you can't touch the pen unless you have clean hands. It goes home with you at the end of the day. So you're going to document. But after documentation, we're going to wash our hands again, because our standard is we need to end the skill with clean hands. Okay. We also want to end a skill with a patient that feels cared for and cared about. We're really good about the first one, right? We're real good about getting, doing skills, learning the technical part of this. We're good at that. We forget that half of our job is to make the patient feel cared about. About. What does that mean? What does it mean to make somebody feel cared about?
Care about how they feel.
Yeah. Treat them like a person. Treat them like a person. So that's the hard part here. It gets harder when you go to work because they'll wear you down. They will. All right. So when we're washing our hands, we're going to wet our hands and we're going to get soap. How much soap do we need? A lot. And then we're going to bring our hands together, and how long are we going to rub? No less than 20 seconds. 20 seconds. And then after we rub, we're going to go down our nails. Clean them, circle our nails on the palm of our hand, and then rinse, keeping our hands in the sink. And then we're going to tap to keep the water in the sink so it doesn't go everywhere. And then we're going to dry. Now, when you think about all the patients that you have to see and all of the skills we have to do with each patient and how many times we're going to wash our hands, it's a whole lot of hand washing going on. Like half of your shift is going to be spent at the sink. So you are allowed in most settings to use a hand sanitizer. In fact, it's encouraged because hand sanitizers actually work a little different than soap and water. Soap and water actually removes the pathogens from your hands. Through friction and soap, those pathogens go right down the drain. So you got clean hands when you're done washing your hands. Now, what hand sanitizer does, a little bit different. This is Jeremy, isn't he cute? So what hand sanitizer does is a little bit different. Hand sanitizer actually breaks down the membrane that holds those pathogens together. So it kind of like, chops it up into little pieces. Okay. But there's a couple problems with hand sanitizer. First of all, nobody ever uses enough. When we use hand sanitizer, we probably do something like this. A little bit of hand sanitizer. Okay, I'm good. Right? That's usually how we use it. But hand sanitizer is not effective if your hands don't remain wet for at least 20 seconds. So that means we have to get a whole lot more, and our hands have to stay wet for at least 20 seconds. And we have to rub all of those same areas that we rubbed before. And we want to make sure that all of those areas are coated so that the alcohol has a chance to break down those cell membranes for bacteria and protein envelopes for viruses. So that, guys, is 20 seconds. You've probably never used hand sanitizer that long in your life. But here's another problem with hand sanitizer. Well, two other problems. First of all, it's going to dry your hands out. Even if it has some moisturizers in it, they still will dry your hands out. So make sure that you've got a good lotion that you use and hydrate your skin often. But the other problem with hand sanitizer, when we went to the sink and we washed our hands, where do those pathogens go? Down the drain. When you use hand sanitizer, it chops up those pathogens into little pieces. Where do the pathogens go? They stay on your hands. That's right. So now I'm eating my large French fries with a side of dead E. coli. Not much more appetizing than live E. coli, right? So if I'm going to bring my hands up near my face, so eating, drinking, talking on the phone, smoking if you smoke, if I'm going to bring my hands up here, rubbing my eyes, wiping my nose, if my hands are going here, then I need to make sure that they are pathogen free. Okay, so that means washing them. Anybody ever go to like one of those big box stores, we're not going to say the name, but where you have little old lady, well, when they used to have cashiers, now we have to check ourselves out. But, there's little old lady cashiers that used to wear gloves when they would scan stuff, right? They didn't want to touch your ketchup. Don't know why. But they would wear gloves and they'd work a 4-hour shift. Now, anybody ever wear gloves for anything, cleaning, whatever? What do gloves make your hands do? Sweat. So gloves are also opaque, so no light gets through. So underneath that glove, we have warm, body heat, dark, and moist. What do we know about warm, dark, moist environments? That's right. Pathogens will multiply in warm, dark, moist environments. So we got this little old lady at the cashier. She doesn't want to touch her ketchup. She stands there for 4 hours, scans, takes money, gives money back, scan. And at the end of the shift, when she's ready to go on break and eat, she takes those gloves off. And what does she think to herself? My hands are clean. I didn't touch her ketchup. So she picks up that tuna salad sandwich with a side of E. coli and can't figure out why she gets sick. It'd be much better, no gloves, wash your hands. Do you see how a little bit of false knowledge, what we think is true, that actually isn't, can actually put us at risk? I'm really going to blow your mind now. All right. So if we're going to be eating, drinking, smoking, or talking on the phone, make sure you wash your hands first. So you've covered these principles. So out of the 11, we now know 3. Great job. We're going to cover 3 more today. So we're rolling right through these principles, and then we're going to use these principles to create skills. So the first skill that we're going to learn is pulse. This is on page 52. We're not going to stay on page 52 for very long, but let's go there now. So on page 52, You see the principles that are involved in this skill. Anything that's grayed out or washed out, that's not going to be part of this skill. So if you look here, you'll see skill rules because we follow the care plan. The opening, because we do the opening for every single skill. Glove rules, which we haven't talked about yet, and the closing. We also have pulse-specific steps, which we'll go into in a minute. But all of those principles are spelled out here. If you did nothing more than followed each one of these, you would get a perfect score on the test. I have a video for this. And down here is test-specific information. So somebody with your level of experience should be able to do this skill in how long? 5 minutes. Who are you going to be doing the skill on? Yeah, another testing student, because you've got a student in that spot. Where is that student going to be for this skill? In the bed. So when you're practicing, make sure you throw your patient in the bed. And charting is required for this skill. So we're going to go over the documentation form and normal values and all of that in just a few minutes. But before I show you this skill, we need to learn a principle. Because remember, all of these principles are what's going to make up the skill. We don't know glove rules yet, so we need to learn about gloves. Now, this would be so much easier if I just told you, wear gloves for everything all the time and don't think about it. Don't worry about it. Just wear gloves for everything. If you're working with patients, wear gloves for everything. And that was the end of my lecture, and I could move on with my life. That would make things so much easier for me. But that thought process is dangerous. Not just for the patient, but also for you and the other people in the environment. So let me explain why. So everything I'm going to talk to you about is going to start on page 40. Glove rules are evaluated for every single skill that we do. I have a video on this that you can watch. This is part of what we call the Big Four. I talked to you about the Big Four on Monday. So skill rules, skill rules, the opening, glove rules, and the closing. Every single skill is always comprised of those 4 principles. So when we're talking about glove rules, we have to evaluate, do we need gloves? We don't wear gloves for everything, and it's a bad practice to wear gloves for everything. It's actually dangerous to wear gloves for everything. But in order for me to explain this to you, I'm going to use a activity that has nothing to do with healthcare, because I find that this activity helps you understand this concept easier, okay? So what we're going to do right now is build a sandwich. This is something everybody is familiar with, right? You've all gone to a sandwich place and told them what you wanted, and they built the sandwich in front of you, right? So when you go to a sandwich shop and you are asking for a sandwich, you're ordering a sandwich, what does the sandwich worker always wear? And you feel good about that, don't you? You don't want them to touch your food with their bare hands, do you? No, that's just gross. We don't want people touching our food with bare hands. So we're happy with the fact that they put on food service gloves. Awesome. All right. So we're going to put some gloves on. Now I'm going to be the one making the sandwich, but you guys are going to be the one ordering it. So you guys are going to get involved in this process. So first we need bread. So what kind of bread do you want? White, wheat, Italian? Okay, let's just go with white. We'll just easy. Okay, so I've got my food service gloves on. I'm gonna reach into this bread cart and I'm gonna grab a loaf of white bread, and then I'm gonna set it on the counter, and I'm gonna pick up the knife that's there, and I'm gonna cut it in half and fold it open. Okay, everybody with me so far? What kind of condiments? Do you want some mayonnaise on that? So in the mayonnaise little thing, there's a spreader. So I'm going to grab the spreader and I'm going to spread mayonnaise on the bread. Put the spreader back. Do you want honey mustard, spicy mustard, anything else? Honey mustard. So now I'm going to grab one of these sauce bottles, pick it up, and squirt the sauce on there, put the sauce bottle back. Okay, so good. I happen to like bacon on my sub, so we're going to get some bacon out of the package, and we're going to put that on the sub. So now we've got a bread with mayonnaise and honey mustard and bacon. So what kind of meat you want? Ham, turkey, roast beef, all the above? Turkey. All right. This is actually a really good sandwich. All right. So I'm going to open up the cooler that's below the counter, and I'm going to reach in and get the package of turkey, close the cooler, and put the turkey on the sandwich. So far, so good. Now, would you like some cheese? Yeah. What kind of cheese do you want? Swiss. So I'm going to go into that cheese store and I'm going to look for Swiss cheese. Oh, we're out of Swiss cheese. All right, hold on a minute. I'm going to go over to the big walk-in cooler, open it up, go in, take the big tubs that have extra, open the tub up, find the Swiss cheese, and of course I have to slice it. So I'm going to go over to the slicer and I'm going to slice that cheese. And then I'll put the big block of cheese back in the cooler. And now I've got sliced Swiss cheese. So we'll put that on the sandwich. So do we want the sandwich toasted? Okay, so we're going to toast the sandwich, but right now it's being used. So we're going to have to wait a second. And I'm probably, because I'm tired, man, this is a lot of standing. So I'm probably just going to kind of lean on stuff, right? So when it's finally our turn at the toaster, I've got to put the sandwich in, turn the dial, and stand there and wait. Now, once it's toasted, I'm going to take a big paddle and get that sandwich out so I don't burn my hands. And I'll put it back on the counter. So now we've got our toasted sandwich back on the counter. So do we want lettuce? Yes. So I'm going to reach into that lettuce, get some out, spread it on the sandwich, and tomato. So I'll reach into the tomato. Do you want that chopped? Okay, so I'm going to put the tomatoes, and we'll grab that knife that was there that we sliced the bread with, and we'll chop the tomato and put it on. How about pickles? Do you want pickles? So garlic pickles. So I'm going to reach in the garlic pickles, squeeze them out really good, and spread those on the sandwich. You want olives? So I'm going to reach in, grab some olives, and spread those on the sandwich. What about green pepper, onion, anything else? Okay, so I'm going to reach in and grab the other toppings and put those on. And oil, vinegar? Okay, so I'm going to grab the thing of oil and spread it, the thing of vinegar and spread it, salt, pepper. So I'll get that shaker and shake the salt and pepper on. So we've just made this wonderful sandwich, and man, that looks really good, doesn't it? So now I'm going to finish up, but in order to close that thing, I'm probably going to have to take that knife that was sitting there and shove it inside to close, because there's a lot of toppings on there. To close that over, take the knife out, and then I'm going to wrap it up. Then I'll go over and type it in to the cash register or the thing that prints out the type of sub. So we're going to do that, and then you're going to pay for it. Now, you might even pay the person who made the sandwich. They'll take one glove off and touch the cash register and then put a new glove on for the next sandwich worker or sandwich orderer. So are you ready to eat that sandwich?
I'm hungry.
Why? Now, you guys just told me, hold up. 5 minutes ago, you told me you were happy they were wearing gloves. They made the sandwich exactly the way you want it. Why don't you want that sandwich now? But were you aware of that 5 minutes ago? No. So this is the problem with gloves, guys. It gives you a false sense of security. Those gloves, did they do what you thought they were going to do? Depends on your point of view. If those gloves were there to protect the sandwich worker, they did exactly what they were supposed to do. That sandwich worker didn't touch anything. So if the gloves were there to protect the sandwich worker, they did a good job. If the gloves were being worn to protect your food, did they do a good job? Let's look at all the things that those gloves touched. So they touched the outside of the bread cart. They touched the knife to cut the bread. They touched the mayonnaise spreader, other sauce bottles, the outside of the bacon package, the cheese drawer, the door handle, the containers in the cooler, slicing machine, the table, the toaster oven controls, the paddle, the lettuce, tomato, and other toppings, and the wrapper. It's a lot of things to touch other than your sandwich, right? Now, this was a real, that was my sandwich. I stood there and took pictures. These are my pictures. I stood there, ordered the sandwich, and took pictures every step of the way. And I ate that sandwich, and it was good. Okay? Knowing everything I just told you, I ate that sandwich. And the reason that I ate it is because my immune system needs a bit of a workout now and then. If I sit on the couch nonstop and don't work out, what's going to happen to my muscles? Yeah, they get flabby. They lose strength, right? If your immune system doesn't occasionally work out, what's going to happen to it? Yeah, it gets flabby. Absolutely. It's not going to be as strong. So I need a little bit of a workout now and then. And thankfully, I live in an environment that I have lots of opportunities for my immune system to work out. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with this sandwich. But if we start to think about gloves a little bit differently, if we start to pay attention to the fact that we need to pay attention to what those gloves are touching, it puts gloves in a little bit different category. So people that wear gloves for everything without ever thinking about it, they just go in and put on a pair of gloves and do what they need to do. They don't think about what they're touching with those gloves. And that's how cross-contamination happens in a clinical setting. Now, this is the problem. We're not in a sandwich shop. We are in a healthcare setting, which means that we have way more germs here than they did at that sandwich shop. And that's where our problem comes in. Everybody with me? Okay. So in order to understand what I'm about to tell you, we have to learn about a concept called the chain of infection. So that's what we're going to focus on right now. This is on page 123 of your book. And what we're going to be talking about is this thing right in the middle, the chain of infection. Here it is a little bigger for you and in color. So your chain of infection always starts with a pathogen, right? No pathogen, no problem. If HIV doesn't exist, it can't spread around. No pathogen, no problem. But once we have a pathogen, that starts the game. Now, pathogens don't live very well out in the open. They don't do well homeless. They're kind of like me, right? I like creature comforts. I don't want to be out in the heat, right? So I don't do well without a comfortable place. Pathogens don't either. In fact, they have a very narrow window of temperature that a pathogen is comfortable in and can survive. So that pathogen actually needs a nice place to live. Now, with pathogens, we call that a reservoir, or if it's living, a host. Okay, so this is where the pathogen lives. It doesn't live outside of the pathogen very long at all. In order to stay active, it needs to be inside a host or a reservoir. Okay, good. Okay, now, I keep forgetting to do this. Okay, so first, no pathogen, no problem. Then they need a place to live. But as long as that pathogen is inside that body or that reservoir, it's happy. It doesn't want to go anywhere. It is warm, it has food, it has everything it needs to live a nice, comfortable life. It is not looking to relocate, not looking to go anywhere. So in most cases, for that pathogen to get out of the body, it has to actually be forced out. Everybody with me? Good. So how does a pathogen get forced out of body? Well, have you ever had a cold? What are some symptoms of a cold? Okay, so let's start there. Runny nose, right? What else? Coughing. What? Fever, sneezing. Okay, so let's talk about those real quick. Believe it or not, those are all signs of a cold, but believe it or not, those are not actually caused by this little guy. Those symptoms are not caused by the pathogen. Those symptoms are your body's way of trying to get rid of that pathogen. Runny nose, your body is trying to push out the pathogen through mucus. Sneezing, your body is trying to forcefully expel that pathogen through sneezing. Coughing, same thing. Your body is trying to forcefully expel that pathogen. Fever, that's your body's way of making it inhospitable. Have you ever had a guest that stayed a little too long? Right? So this is the body's way of saying, hey, we don't want you here anymore. So we turn up the temperature to make it uncomfortable so the pathogen leaves. Remember I said pathogens need a very narrow window of temperature. So you're starting to see the pathogen didn't cause all these things. It's your body. So all of these things are a way for your body to force this pathogen out. Now, this can also happen through cuts in the skin where the patient bleeds. It can happen through urine and feces. It can happen through sexual fluids as well, but the body is forcing out that pathogen. Okay, so we probably should stay away from anything that comes out of another body. Okay, so a good rule of thumb, don't let stuff from other people's body into yours. Okay. And yes, it works for everything. All right, so pathogens live in a host, and they have to have a doorway out. Now, if there's no doorways, that pathogen stays inside the host. They're not really a danger to anybody. So if you have HIV and you're sitting there with HIV, you're not a danger to anybody because that pathogen is safely in your body. It's not unless you start bleeding all over everything that the pathogen's getting out. Okay. Skin, kind of like walls. They keep the pathogen in. Pathogens can't punch through skin. They don't have that ability, no matter what Hollywood says. All right, so pathogens have to come and go through open doors. So eyes, nose, mouth, genitals, rectal area, wounds, rashes, sores, or incisions will let pathogens out. So if we're going to be touching any of those things, we probably want an extra layer of protection. Good? Questions? All right, so we call these wet body openings. So wet body opening is the eyes, nose, mouth, genitals, rectal area, wounds, rashes, sores, or incisions. You'll hear me say that a lot. So the real problem here is that pathogens don't move around on their own. They just don't. It's kind of like this pen. If I put the pen there, that pen's going to stay there. It's not going to go anywhere by itself. It doesn't have any legs. It doesn't have any wings. It doesn't have any way of getting anywhere by itself. So it relies on something else to take it, like this table can take it somewhere. I can take it somewhere. You can take it somewhere, but it has to have something to get it around. Okay? Pathogens do not move on their own. Now, the something that moves a pathogen really depends on the pathogen. Okay? Some pathogens are pretty heavy. Yeah. kind of heavy. Those pathogens are only going to move in fluid, blood, body fluids. Heavy pathogens move in fluid. So we call that flowing, right? So heavy pathogens, which is most of them, usually move in fluid. But there are a few that are a little lighter. Those pathogens can hitch a ride on droplets. Now, droplets are little tiny itty bitty aerosolized body fluids. So when I'm talking, little tiny bits of saliva come out. You can't see them, but if you put a black screen here and turn me to the side and shone a light, you would see little bits of fluid coming out. When I laugh, little bits of fluid come out, right? When I sneeze and cough, little bits of fluid come out. So pathogens that can hitch a ride on those little droplets, those will spread a little bit further, right? Because droplets spread a little bit further. But still, I mean, if you're over there, you're not getting any of my little droplets because you're too far away. So pathogens that are heavy and have to move around in fluid, that fluid is only going to go so far. Right? You'd have to touch the fluid to be in danger. Pathogens that ride on droplets, that goes out a little further, maybe 6 feet. And pathogens that move in the air can spread as far and wide as they want to go because they just hitch a ride in the air. So when we're talking about pathogens, one of the first things we have to think about is, how does this pathogen move? Now, do you guys remember a couple years ago when COVID was a brand new thing? Right? And they told all of us, stay home. Don't go anywhere. The reason that they told us that is because we did not know. It's a brand new pathogen. We did not know. Is this a heavy pathogen that only moves in fluid? Is this a lighter pathogen that moves on droplets? Is this an airborne pathogen that we're not going to be able to control because it's out there in the air? And until we have enough data to work with, we try to keep you guys safe by saying, hey, stay home. We don't know yet. Just stay where it's safe. Stay home. And then once they realize, okay, this is a droplet pathogen, right? Hitches a ride on droplets. Then they said, okay, you can go out, but stay 6 feet away from other people. You guys remember that? Okay. Now, you don't want stuff from other people's body holes in your body holes, right? Especially if it probably has a virus on it. That's why they had us cover up our body holes. So anything that came out of your body hole did not get into my body hole. So these were all what we call common sense precautions. It's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to suddenly get rid of the pathogen. That's here to stay. We still have COVID. But what we're trying to do is try to infect as few people as possible so that, we can get a handle on this. Make sense? Okay. So we can use the lessons that we learned from COVID to apply to this. When we have a pathogen, it is either going to flow because it's heavy. In that case, you don't want to touch body fluids. It can float on droplets. You don't want to be within 6 feet. Or it could be in the air. In that case, good luck. Now, there are very, very, very few airborne pathogens. And thank God for that. Because airborne pathogens, there's no way to stop the spread. How do you stop something that's in the air? So thankfully, there are very few airborne pathogens. And remember, most pathogens don't live outside of a host very long. So once it gets in the air, it's not going to go very far unless it gets into somebody else. Good? Makes sense? Do you guys understand this part of the chain of infection? All right. So pathogens either flow or they float to get from one person to another. This is called the mode of transmission, how a pathogen moves around in an environment, called the mode of transmission. Does it flow? Does it float? Is it in the air? Now, you guys don't need to know this as CNAs. You're not responsible for figuring any of this out. But you are responsible for knowing this, because when we are caring for patients that have specific pathogens, we need to know when they tell us to wear a mask, there's a reason behind it. When they tell us to wear a gown, it's because we're going to be in an environment that has a lot of pathogens and we don't want them on our clothes. So the infection control people know all of this, and they know it really, really well. And they're going to tell the rest of us how to protect that patient and ourselves. Good? This is called transmission-based precautions. But just getting out of the host, that's only step one. So we've got a pathogen that lives in a host. It got its way out somehow, either through an incision or a sore or a cut or a sneeze or something. It's out of the patient. And it had a way of getting around, either through body fluids or through droplets in the air. But just because we have a pathogen out of a host doesn't really mean much of anything. That pathogen is of no danger to anybody else unless it can get in a new host. Remember, they don't live very long outside. So it has to get in a new host through a doorway. Remember, pathogens can't drill. They have no jackhammers on board. Guaranteed. So getting a pathogen on your skin, not a problem. The problem is that we generally bring our hands up to our face many times every hour. We, pull our hair back, we rub our nose, we scratch an itch, or we just put our hand on our head. So we bring our hands, which may have pathogens on them, up to our face quite often. Now, you know what's on your face? A doorway, a doorway, a doorway, and a doorway. In fact, the most doorways you have on your body are on your face. Now, ears, those are kind of interesting little things, because ears actually, in most cases, aren't considered doorways, primarily because it doesn't have the ear canal doesn't really have a direct access to your bloodstream. Okay. So your mouth does, your nose does, your eyes do. But in most cases, your ears aren't considered an open doorway. Now, that does change in some situations, like if you have tubes in your ears, or if you have a brand new piercing, right? Not an old piercing. Old piercings grow skin to, so they're old. They dermatize is the term for it. So we're looking for wet body openings. And if that pathogen is able to get out of a host, travel to a new host, and find a doorway in, that's when infections occur. But there's one more step that has to be completed for you to get infected. And that has to do with your susceptibility. So pathogens have to have an open door. I think of these things as vampires. A vampire can't come into your home unless they're invited, right? So pathogens are kind of like that. They can't come into you unless they find an open doorway. So when that pathogen is able to enter through an open doorway, you need to be susceptible. So susceptible means that your immune system isn't able to fight this thing off, doesn't have the tools it needs to immediately stop this invasion. So, anybody ever watched the movie Independence Day with Will Smith? Anybody ever watched that movie? Okay, there was 1 and 2. Real quick, let me explain. So the first one, aliens came to the planet. They destroyed a whole bunch of stuff. We kicked their butts and sent them on their way. Good job. In 2, we already knew what the aliens were like. We had seen them before. We knew how to kill them, right? We'd figured that out previous episode, right? We had all the notes. We knew what to do. So when they came back, we were ready. We knew what to do. We were ready. Now, so the story went on in a little bit different direction, right? Because we already knew how to kill them. So they had to bring something else into the story to make it interesting. So that's the way. I love that movie because it really is a great allegory to the way your immune system works. The first time that your immune system encounters a pathogen, it takes a long time for your immune system to figure out how to kill it. So let's say a bad guy, there's a whole bunch of bad guys out there, whole bunch of bad guys out on the other side of this wall. First one comes in and sees you because you're right there. So you try to get rid of the pathogen, bad guy, and you stab it with your mechanical pencil. Doesn't kill him. But he runs outside because you scared him. He runs outside. He tells everybody else, hey, she's got this pencil thing. Stings. Avoid her. So the next bad guy that comes in, you're sitting there. You pick up that chair beside you and you bop it over the head. Doesn't do a whole lot, but he runs out and he tells everybody else, hey, mechanical pencil, chair. Third pathogen comes in. You're sitting there. You know that none of those 2 things work. So you pick up the fire extinguisher, bash it over the head, spray it in the eyes, and you kill it. Oh, well, now we know how to kill it, right? So when the next one, he's not able to go back and tell the other guys about the fire extinguisher. So the next one that comes in, we kill him too. And the next one that comes in, we kill him too. And they're not able to go out and tell the other bad guys about our defenses because we killed them. But it takes time for that process. It takes time. And then once we figure out how to kill them, we create these little note cards and we put them in our filing cabinet so that when we see a pathogen, a little secretary goes and says, wait a second, I've seen that one. Hold on. This is how we kill them. It's a fire extinguisher. And then your immune system goes, cool. And they all load up on fire extinguishers and kill the pathogen and you don't get sick. That's the way your immune system works. But the first infection, you're going to get sick because your body is trying to figure out how to kill off that pathogen. It's trying all kinds of stuff. You're coughing, you're sneezing, you're running a fever, you're doing all kinds of stuff to get rid of this pathogen until the immune system can figure it out. Good? Makes sense? Makes sense? Okay, so if you have seen that pathogen before, your little secretary has a note card on how to kill it. So it's not going to be able to infect you because your body already knows how to kill that thing. Good? Now, we can shortcut this. So most of the time, you have to get infected to figure out how to kill it. Most of the time. This is why we get sick a lot when we're kids, because your kids are building up their filing cabinet. That's what it means. So most of the time, we have to get infected with something before we figure out how to kill it and keep notes. But there are a few things that along the way, we figured out how to shortcut this. So we send an all points bulletin, a little wanted poster with a picture of the pathogen to your immune system and say, hey, I know you haven't seen this guy before, but this is what he looks like, and this is how we kill him. So it has a picture and some detailed directions. Now, it's not as good as what's in the filing cabinet, right? Our own experience, but it gives us a good starting point. We call that a vaccine. A vaccine is a set of instructions to your immune system. This is what the pathogen looks like, and this is how we kill it. That's what a vaccine is. Good? Make sense? So if you have seen that pathogen before and know how to kill it, you will. If you've had a vaccine for that pathogen, your body has a jump start and could most likely figure out how to kill that thing because it's got a good starting point. It doesn't have to start at the mechanical pencil or the chair. Can skip that. Go straight to the fire extinguisher. So, make sense? I know this is kind of deep. Big stuff here. So if your immune system has been trained on how to kill that pathogen, pathogen doesn't have a chance to multiply and cause an infection. So having a healthy immune system, this is why my immune system needs to work out occasionally. This is why I ate that delicious sandwich, because I know my immune system needs some training. And that sandwich was perfectly okay. But here's the thing. This is why I am pretty healthy. I'm pretty healthy. Is this guy healthy? Ah, therein lies the problem. Remember that our patients are already fighting something. Their immune system is already busy. So when we have a patient in a clinical setting, and remember, pathogens don't live long on surfaces, as caregivers, we have to understand that the person that's at risk here between me and this guy is this guy, because my immune system pretty healthy. This guy's immune system, not so much. He's fighting something else. And trying to fight a two-front war, never a good idea. Does that make sense? Okay. So pathogens usually travel in fluids. So as a caregiver, I know my immune system's pretty healthy, but I probably don't want to take the chance if I'm going to touch a fluid that there might be something in it. So if I am going to touch body fluids like blood, urine, feces, wound drainage, then I probably want an extra layer of protection. Gloves. If I am going to touch places that body fluid came out of, like personal skin, I want a set of gloves on. If I'm going to touch non-intact skin, so wounds, rashes, sores, incisions, areas that liquid can come out, I want an extra layer of protection. Good? That's when gloves should be worn. So if I know that there's pathogens and they live in a host, but they need something to travel on, I don't want to be that something. So gloves provide an extra layer of protection. Good? Any questions? All right, one more thing real quick. Remember, skin-to-skin contact is not how diseases are spread. Pathogens can't drill out. They can't drill in. It's through body fluids and open skin. So even if you do touch body fluids, as long as those pathogens don't come into contact with any of your doorways, you're good. So let's say that I touch, let's say you've got HIV, you bleed on the table, I come along, and for some reason I put my hand in that blood. I'm still not infected, guys. That HIV cannot drill through my skin. What would I want to do? Like right now? Okay, so I'm going to wash my hands, but I'm not at risk. My skin is going to protect me. Now, here is the problem, right? Sometimes we have little cuts and openings on our skin, like hangnails, especially in the winter, when pathogens really like the winter. They like move to Florida in the winter. And, you know, when your cuticles dry out, now you got like little openings. So watch your skin. If you've got body openings, you need to be aware of that. But just plain skin, yeah, those pathogens can't get through. They can't. All right, so this is our chain of infection. It's only when a pathogen leaves a host through a doorway and travels on fluid or air currents and finds a wet body opening to invade and that person is susceptible, does an infection occur. It's a whole lot of steps. And the one that we are going to interrupt most often is this one. By wearing an extra layer of protection, gloves, we are preventing the spread of that pathogen from one place to another. Good? So this is my cardinal rule. Don't let stuff from other people's holes into yours. Cover your holes. Cardinal rule. Now, I take this pretty seriously. Pretty seriously. I've got kids. They're all grown, flown. I'm an empty nester. But my oldest son was out working with his dad and dropped, they were like 3 hours away, dropped something heavy on his leg, and it took his skin down all the way to the tendon. My husband calls me up, says, what do I do? So I sent him to the local drugstore, told him what dressing supplies to get, told him how to bandage it. This is before video calls were a thing. This is many years ago. And told him to bandage it, bring him home to me, and I'll take a look at it. So he did. So they get home, and I put a pair of gloves on. And my son, who was 17 or 18 at the time, he's like, Mom, I'm your kid. Yes, you are. And I love you dearly. But you have been out of my sight for more than 15 minutes in your lifetime, and I don't know what's gone where. So I'm serious. If I'm going to touch body fluids and they're not mine, I'm going to have gloves on. And you should too. You can't tell by looking at somebody whether they're sick. And most of the time, your patients don't even know that they're sick because they haven't been diagnosed yet. We don't have these little LCD screens on our foreheads yet. They're coming, but we don't have them yet that pops up and says, hey, you're infected with, right? You have to wait. You have to get infected. You got to wait for the pathogen to, grow enough to cause symptoms. And then those symptoms have to be bad enough to make you go to the doctor because we ignore everything, right? I'm fine. I'll get over it. They got to be bad enough for you to go to the doctor. And then the doctor has to order tests. And then we got to wait for those tests to come back. And then we got to wait to go back to the doctor to get the results of the test. And that's a whole lot of time that you are walking around infected, able to spread it to other people, and you don't know it yet. Now, the really scary thing is some things don't have symptoms for a very long time, like hepatitis. There are, conservatively speaking, probably about 1,000 people in this county with hepatitis right now that don't even know it. You don't know because there's no symptoms, but you're able to spread it on. So cover your holes. So gloves do help. They create another layer of protection, but they are not the magic suit of armor you think they are. Now, this is really going to make you think. So when we start thinking about who actually needs that extra layer of protection, it becomes pretty obvious that the patient is really the one at risk here. Yeah, I don't want anything, sure. But I'm washing my hands before I touch the patient. I'm washing my hands after I touch the patient. My immune system's pretty healthy. I'm good. As long as I'm not touching any body fluids or skin openings or personal skin, I'm good because I'm using good hand washing. Where are those pathogens going? Down the drain. They're not a danger to me, right? But who is at risk? The patient. Yeah. So you're pretty healthy. Your immune system's just on standby, but your patient is fighting something else. And if we have our patients in an environment, a pathogen-rich environment, they're the ones at risk because if their white blood cells, their immune cells are so busy fighting these guys, there's nobody left to fight those. So we have to be a little bit more aware of this. So this is particularly important for CNAs because this is what we do with patients, right? We help them get ready for bed. We help them with toileting. Yeah, that's body openings. We help them with grooming. Oh, wait, that's body openings. We help them with bathing. Oh, oops, that's body openings. We help them with dressing. Oh, that's pretty good. Okay. We help them with eating, socializing, and other activities. So most of the things that we do with patients involves access to their wet body openings. So Remember, we aren't the ones at risk here. If I'm going to go near a wet body opening, I'm going to wear gloves. But we're not really the ones at risk here. Your patients are, because you're in their wet body openings, you can bring a pathogen from the environment into them. Good. Bathing, feeding, mouth care, denture care, peri-care, catheter care, and toileting put your patient at risk. So those doorways can let those pathogens out, but they can also let the pathogens in. And that's really where gloves are supposed to be employed. Where gloves are there not just to protect you, but to protect your patient from the pathogens that are in the environment. So gloves provide an extra layer of protection for the patient too. So remember that pathogens need a doorway out and they need fluids to travel in. So for us, we are going to wear gloves if we're going to touch body fluids, personal skin, or non-intact skin. That's when we are going to wear gloves. Now, I told you an hour ago that the first skill we're going to learn here is pulse. So your skin is intact. We're taking a radial pulse on a patient. If you look around, pretty much everybody's skin here is intact. Would you need gloves to take a radial pulse on somebody with intact skin? No. So do you see why it's important not to wear gloves all the time? Okay. All right. Yeah, you can't tell by looking at somebody whether they have pathogens in them. A lot of people are sick and they just don't know it yet. So when we're working with all patients, we just assume that all of those body fluids and personal skin and non-intact skin have a pathogen, and we're going to wear gloves. This is called standard precautions or universal precautions. Just means that we're going to treat all patients like they might have something that we can spread around. So anytime we're going to touch body fluids, personal skin, or non-intact skin on any patient, we're going to wear gloves. So this occurs for everybody. So when we're evaluating the need for gloves, we have to think about doorways and fluids. So if we're going to touch any doorway or any fluids, we need gloves. But they only work if you use them correctly. You have to put them on at the right time. So this is probably the hardest thing for you to learn with gloves, because we tend to want to put gloves on at the beginning of the skill. And this is when you're starting to practice the skills, this is the part that you're really going to struggle with. I've seen it thousands of times. You're going to put your gloves on at the wrong time. Remember, those gloves are there to protect the patient's body openings from pathogens in the environment. So what do you think the first thing those gloves should touch is? The patient. If you're touching the table, you're getting pathogens that you will then transfer to the patient. If you're touching supplies, you're picking up pathogens that you'll transfer to the patient. If you're touching the bed or the curtain or your uniform or anything else, you're transferring those pathogens directly to the patient's doorways. So the first thing our gloves should touch is the patient. This is the hardest step you have to learn in this class. Hands down. When to put gloves on. Knowing when to wear them, that's pretty easy. But knowing when to put them on is way harder. So if you just remember this, the first thing your gloves should touch is the patient. It always makes sure you're putting gloves on at the right time. Okay, good. So once we've worn gloves, we have to think about what those dirty gloves have touched, because those dirty gloves are now full of pathogens. And if you start touching other things in the environment, like the curtain or the bed controls or the sheet or anything else, you're going to transfer those pathogens all over that environment, just like the sandwich maker. Okay. Good. So pay attention to what those dirty gloves have touched. And then we need to know how to remove our gloves correctly. So pull on a pair of gloves here. So let me show you this real quick. How you remove gloves is just as important as knowing when to wear them. So you guys can practice this in a little bit. I'll pass the gloves around in a minute, but let me just demonstrate this real quick. So let's say that I'm doing a skill. I put my gloves on. The first thing my gloves touch is the patient, right? So I've worked on the patient. I have dirty gloves. My gloves are soiled and I've got to take them off. So the way that we take off gloves is very, very important. I do not want to touch my skin with these dirty gloves. I don't want to transfer pathogens onto me. So in order to take these off, I can't go underneath because that touches my skin. So what I'm going to do is take my thumb and index finger and I'm going to pinch up here. And that pulls this off inside out without touching my skin. I'm going to wind it up in the palm of my hand so it's not waving around. And then now I'm going to go under. Skin can touch skin, but I can't touch that dirty glove. I don't want to do this. See what I'm touching? I want to go underneath to remove that glove. So one inside out glove is inside the other inside out glove. Good? Okay. I used to, I had an activity I was doing with students, but I had too many students that ruined their scrubs. So you can do this at home. Get an old t-shirt. Take shaving cream. You know, the old-fashioned like cream, not the gel, cream. Put a couple drops of food coloring in, mix it up, and put gloves on. Touch your gloves to the shaving cream. So now you got shaving cream all over your gloves. Now, take those gloves off without getting any of that shaving cream on you. If you can do that, you know how to take gloves off correctly. Okay, good? Yeah, but too many students were ruining their scrubs because the food coloring wouldn't come out. All right, so gloves are not the magic suit of armor that we think they are. We're going to go on break in just a few minutes. They don't provide as much protection as you think they do. This is probably one of the most false concepts that we have. Gloves are made out of latex, same stuff as these balloons, latex. There are some gloves that are made out of vinyl and nitrile now. Yes, there are. But for the most part, most gloves are made out of some latex or latex derivative. So what happens to a balloon that's filled up with helium over time? Yeah, it does this, right? Shrivels up, deflates. How does that happen? Well, air has to leak out of it. Where does the air leak out? To answer that question, we have to look at the material that those latex balloons are made out of. Latex is a man-made material. Like every man-made material, it has holes. It's not completely solid. Now, it's solid to our vision, but it's not completely solid. Just like your clothes, right? Your clothes look solid. Like you can't see through my shirt. But if I held it up to the light, you would actually see little teeny tiny holes where the weave joins. So little teeny tiny holes. Now, pathogens are super, super, super small. So those holes look huge to pathogens. So these holes in the latex let the helium molecules leak out. So as that balloon is small when it's made, those holes are pretty tight. As you fill that balloon up with helium and the fabric stretches, what happens to those holes? They get bigger. And over time, helium is able to wiggle out through those holes. As the helium escapes, the balloon deflates, and eventually those holes close up, and now it's just kind of a sad-looking little clump. So when we're wearing gloves, We want to make sure that the gloves that we select are the right size. If you have gloves that are really stretching, remember you're really stretching those holes. It also is going to depend on how much time you wear the gloves. The longer the balloon is filled with helium, the more chance it has to escape. That balloon holds the helium pretty well for the first couple hours. So as you wear gloves, the longer you wear them, the more chance there is that pathogens can intrude. Okay, good. So gloves have holes. So if helium was able to get through that hole, that's no problem for pathogens. No problem at all. Now, they've done many, 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 many studies on this. This is probably the favorite microbiology study that is done for a microbiology class. They will culture, they'll have somebody go wash their hands. They'll culture the hands, right? Rub a swab over it, put it on a petri dish, put it in an incubator, and they'll have somebody put gloves on and go do something. And then they'll take the gloves off, and before they wash their hands, they'll culture them again. Now, in an ideal world, if you had clean hands and put on gloves, did whatever you were going to do, there shouldn't be anything on the hands, right? Right? The hands should have protected you. Every single time. Every single time. That second swab grows pathogens. This is not theoretical, guys. Pathogens get through gloves. So the number one mistake that students make when they're wearing gloves, just like that that big box store cashier, they put their gloves on, they scan the items, they don't want to touch your ketchup, they take their gloves off and go eat lunch. And they don't wash their hands because in their mind, their hands are clean. Are their hands clean? No. So if you decide to wear gloves because you're going to be touching something wet and sticky that's not yours, personal skin or non-intact skin, you better make sure you're washing your hands after you take those gloves off because you do have pathogens. And remember, those gloves are making your hands sweat. So you don't just have pathogens, they have multiplied. Warm, dark, moist. Got it? All right. This is a close-up of your skin after you've worn gloves. You can see all the moisture. It does make your hands very moist. So inside that glove is the ideal breeding environment, warm, dark, and moist. So please wash your hands after you wear gloves. We've already gone over glove removal. You've got step-by-step instructions on page 43 on how to remove gloves. But this shows you a picture demonstration of what I just showed you. You're going to pinch up at the cuff, pull that off inside out, go underneath the second cuff, and pull that one off inside out as well. So any questions on glove rules? We're going to use gloves if we might touch personal skin, wet, ooey gooey that's not yours, right? Body fluids, or non-intact skin. First thing your gloves should touch is the patient. So that tells you when to put them on. Be careful about what you touch in the environment to prevent cross-contamination, and then make sure you remove them correctly. Now, students a lot of times will ask me, well, why can't I just wear gloves all the time for the test for every skill so I don't have to think about this? And my answer is because you're graded on knowing this. If you try to use gloves to take a pulse and there's no need to use gloves to take a pulse, that evaluator is going to tell you, you don't need gloves for this. And that will throw you off, but it also tells them that you don't understand infection control. And that's going to put your patients at risk out there. It'll also put you at risk. Good? Questions? Questions? I know this is a big topic, really big topic. There's a lot to digest here. So let's go ahead and go on break. Give your brain a little time to stretch. and come back in 15 minutes. Come back at 11, and I'll give you 17 minutes, 16 minutes. Come back at 11, and we will get into how to take a pulse.
Okay, anybody have any questions on what we've gone over so far? No? Does everything make sense to you? Okay. All right, so now we can learn how to take a pulse because now we know all of the principles involved and we can concentrate just on the steps that are specific to pulse. Remember, we're always going to follow the care plan. We're always going to do the opening. Every skill starts with an opening. Every opening starts with a knock. Okay. Every skill ends the same way with the closing. And now we know for every skill, we have to evaluate glove use. So all 4 of those principles are always in every single skill. So now let's move on to pulse specific topics. So let's start with what a pulse is. I know I'm going to knock that over. All right. So on the left side of your chest, you have a heart. That heart squeezes. When that heart squeezes, it pushes a wave of blood out. That wave pushes the one in front of it. That wave pushes the one in front of it. And that wave pushes the one in front of it. And this is how blood moves through your body. So you have a wave of blood when the heart contracts, and then a valley when the heart is at rest. So if I were to cut open an artery and let you look inside, you would see a wave of blood and then a valley, a wave of blood and then a valley, a wave of blood and then a valley. Even slasher movies get this right because the blood spurts. Wave of blood, valley. Wave of blood, valley. Okay, good. All right. So blood moves through the vascular system, our arteries, in waves. So what we're going to do is press down on an artery and try to feel those waves. If we count the number of waves, we know how many times the heart contracted, because each wave is made when the heart contracts. So this is actually called an indirect measurement of heart rate, because we're not actually measuring the heart, we're measuring the waves that the heart produced. Good. Now, when we're taking a pulse, we never use our thumb. When you use your thumb has an artery in it, pretty big one actually. When you use your thumb and you compress it, like you press down, you can actually feel your own pulse. So if you're using your thumb, there's a chance that you're actually taking your own pulse, not the patient's. So we want to use 2 fingers, our index finger and our middle finger. We're going to use the fingertips, not the flat part of our fingers, our fingertips, because they have way more nerve endings. You got way more nerve endings in the tip of your finger than you do in the flat part. So no thumb, 2 fingers at the fingertip. And we're going to use that to press down on an artery and feel the waves that move through underneath our fingers. While we're feeling those waves, we're going to count them. So wave moves through and we feel it. 1, 2, 3. However many waves move through that we feel with our fingers, that's what we're counting. And that tells us how many times the heart beat. Now, these kind of feel like little thumps underneath your fingertips. Little thumps. We want to count the thumps. Now, a lot of people don't really understand this. They just think you put your fingers here and then you count to 60, and that doesn't do anything. You're not counting to 60. That what you want to count are the thumps. Now, normal is between 60 and 100. So yeah, you might get a pulse rate of 60, but you're not just counting to 60, you're counting the thumps. And those thumps should hopefully be somewhere between 60 and 100 within that minute. Pulses are always recorded over a minute, always. If somebody says the heart rate was 72, that means that over a minute, that heart beat 72 times. If somebody records a pulse rate of 64, that means that that heart beat 64 times in that time period. Pulses are always recorded over a minute. Good. But you don't always have to count for a minute. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Picture really is worth 1,000 words, but I forget to advance the slides. All right. So And always take a manual pulse. That's what this is. This is a manual pulse where we use our fingers to count the thumps. In a clinical setting, a lot of times we use one of these. Kind of looks like a clothespin type thing. This is called a pulse ox. And you turn it on. You put it on the fingertip, and it will give you, bless you, it will give you a reading. Actually gives you two numbers. One of them is going to be the pulse. The other one is going to be the amount of oxygen in the bloodstream. So pulse ox, pulse and oxygen. Okay. So if you look at this, my oxygen level is 99. Hey, I'm doing good today. It'll never be 100. 99 is the best you can do. And then below that, we have a pulse reading. Can somebody tell me what my pulse is? It's going to fluctuate a little bit because I'm standing and I'm talking and I'm moving. But 77, 79, somewhere in there. Is that, oh, let's go back. Is that normal? Oh, cool. I don't have to call my doctor today. Good job. All right. So most of the time in a clinical setting, we're going to use one of these. It's quick. It's easy. This takes me a minute, right? I got to count for a minute. I can take a shortcut. I'll talk to you about that in a minute, but this takes me a long time. I can just put this thing on the finger and be done. So in a lot of cases, wherever you go to work, they'll be using these because they're quick, they're efficient, but they're also very accurate. So I expect at some point that manual pulse will go off of the state exam. That'll be a skill that they drop, and they'll put this on in its place. So I just want you to be familiar with this. Okay. All right. So in order to take a pulse, we have to find it. Now, this is the radial pulse. You actually have two pulses in your wrist. You have a radial, which is way up at the top, and then, bless you, then you have an ulnar, which is way down at the bottom. So think under, ulnar, right? The ulnar is under. So this is where my thumb is. If I put my hand out like I'm going to shake somebody's hand, my thumb's sticking up, and I take my fingers and I stand them on the bone at the very top of my wrist. I stand them up like I'm going to dive off a cliff, and then I roll those fingers forward and put my thumb on the back. I will find my pulse. Because your pulse is the artery located right below the bone at the top of your wrist. Everybody see if you can find your artery. Find your artery. Everybody find your artery? Anybody dead? Don't use your thumb. Use your fingers. Is anybody dead? Are you dead? I like dead people. Okay. So your pulse is right here, right here. You see two fingers? Put them right there. Put your thumb on the back.
I still feel it.
You don't feel it? Okay. So let go for a second. Do you feel how hard I'm pressing? Were you pressing harder?
Yeah.
Okay. So we don't want to press super hard, just lightly.
Oh, there.
Let's see if I can help you. So we're going to be way up here at the bendy part of the wrist where the lines are. Yours is right here, right under my fingers. Relax your wrist. Relax. Right here, under my fingers. Put your thumb on the back. Nope. Put your fingers here and your thumb on the back. Good. 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 Did you find it? Did you find it? Okay. Good. Everybody good? Okay. So a couple things here real quick. Remember, this is a wave of blood moving through an artery. Your artery is like a straw. It's enclosed. It's round, just like a straw. Now, if I try to take a sip, liquid comes through. What happens if I do this? Yeah, blocks it. Liquid isn't going to get through. So if you press too hard, you are crimping the straw. So we want to start light and gradually increase our pressure until we pick up the pulse. Make sense? Now, let's talk about the thumb on the back side. You can see that here, the thumb on the back side. Why is that important? So if I have fingers and I just lay them, bless you, on the pulse, if I just lay them there, I might find the pulse. I might. But over time, remember we have to count for 1 minute. Over time, my fingers are going to relax. There's nothing I can do about it. They're going to. Fingers are kind of lazy. So they're going to relax. Well, when they relax, I'm going to lose my count. So in order to prevent losing the count, when you find the pulse, put your thumb on the back side so it makes a C shape. And that holds consistent pressure so that you won't lose the count as you're counting. The pulse doesn't just go away. If you're taking a pulse and it just kind of goes away, it's you, not the patient. Trust me, their heart's still beating. Questions on that? Questions? Okay, so the elbow needs to be supported. You're going to hear lots more about elbows supported throughout this program. Elbows always have to be supported. Okay, kind of like teenagers. Always have to be supported. So in this case, your patient is laying in bed. I know that because the page showed me at the bottom that I've got a real patient laying in bed. So we want to make sure that that elbow is supported. What happens if you ask somebody to hold their arm up while you're taking the pulse? It's actually going to affect the pulse rate. And the reason for that, go ahead and hold your arm up real quick until I tell you to take it down. Okay, just keep it up there. I'm going to ask you to keep it up there for about a minute. But after about 20 seconds, it's going to get really heavy. You're going to want to put it down. And I'm going to ask you not to. So you just keep your arm out there. So what's happening is because this is heavy, your body has to push more blood to that arm to keep it in that position. So if we're pushing more blood, that's elevating the heart rate. So if I have the arm up, go ahead and take it down. If I have the arm up, it's going to artificially elevate the pulse. Okay, make sense? Do you guys feel how uncomfortable that is? Okay, so we don't want to artificially elevate the pulse. So the elbow needs to be supported on the bed. We're going to find the pulse at the bendy part of the wrist. So way up here where the lines are, not down here. Too much tissue down here, you're not going to feel the artery. We want the artery where it's really close to the surface, which is at the bendy part of the wrist. Good? Okay. So this is our care plan for the test. It says patient will be lying in bed for the skill. Yay. Take the patient's radial pulse. Now, the test doesn't even trust that you know where the radial pulse is. They're going to tell you. Take the patient's radial pulse measured at the wrist for 1 full minute and record your readings. So how long are we counting for? And we're doing that because the care plan told us to. Good. I could make this class like 2 months long easy because there's so many other things I can do with you guys. Like years ago, I was teaching a separate class, an additional class to this called Health Science Concepts. And we played a game at the very beginning and it was Simon Says. Anybody remember how to play Simon Says? Right? So Simon Says, the game is you have to do what Simon says, but you can't do it if Simon didn't say to do it, right? So it's a great way to introduce the care plan because instead of Simon Says, it's the care plan says. If you're doing something that the care plan didn't tell you to do, you have lost the game. So our care plan here says 1 full minute. So we're going to count for 1 full minute. Now, the problem is if you guys have family members and friends at home that work in medical, or you go onto YouTube and you type in how to take a pulse. Now, in medical, we don't count for 1 full minute. That we don't have time for that. That is an insanely long period of time. You're going to find out just how long that is in just a minute. That's an insanely long period of time. So most of the time, we don't count for 1 full minute. We can get the same reading by counting for 15 seconds and then multiplying that by 4. So if you go home, if your Aunt Shirley works in medical and you say, hey, how long do you count the pulse for? She's going to tell you 15 seconds, multiply that by 4, and that's your reading, because nobody's got time for that. Okay. So this is okay. We can do this. This is absolutely okay in a clinical setting. No problem. You can use one of these if they tell you you can. You can count for 15 seconds if they tell you you can. But for this skill, for the test, and remember, your care plans are way up here at the top of the skills page. Our care plan tells us to count for 1 full minute. So if we counted for 15 seconds, even though it's perfectly okay out there, if we counted for 15 seconds, are we following the care plan for this patient? No. Do we need to know why we have to count for 1 full minute for this patient? No. Doesn't matter to us why. There could be a million reasons why the nurse needs a full minute count. We don't need to know what the reasons are. We just need to know that this is our instruction and we're going to follow it. This is the most failed skill on the state exam. The most failed skill on the state exam. And the reason it's the most failed skill is because people don't count for 1 full minute. That tells them that they don't know anything about the care plan. And if you don't know about the care plan, how in the world are you going to be a CNA? Good? Easy peasy. So here are our steps for pulse. First, always support the arm. Remember, elbows are like teenagers. They have to be supported. Don't use your thumb to take the pulse. We're going to use our fingertips, not the flat part of our fingers. And you're going to, the radial pulse is located on the thumb side of the wrist near the bone. So you're going to find it with 2 fingers and put your thumb on the back. Pulses are always reported over 1 minute. Whether you have to count for 1 minute or not depends on the care plan, but they're always reported over 1 minute. And our normal values are 60 to 100. For the test, you have to say start when you start counting and stop when you stop counting. And that's how they know if you've counted for a minute. But the other reason that you're saying start and stop is because you're not the only one counting the pulse. You're on one side of the bed, counting the pulse on the patient. On the other side of the bed is the evaluator, counting the pulse of the patient, because they've got to find out whether you're accurate. And the only way to figure out if you're accurate is to count with you. Because remember, the pulse is always the heart pushing out a wave of blood. So it doesn't matter whether you're here or here, the pulse is always coming from here. So you're counting the pulse on one side, the evaluator is counting the pulse on the other side. She needs to know when you start counting and when you stop counting so they can start and stop at the same time and hopefully get the same number. You can be off a little bit for the test. 4 beats in either direction, actually. That's more than a little bit. So if the evaluator got 76 and you got 72 or 73 or 74 or 75 or 76 or 77 or 78 or 79 or 80, you're still accurate. Guys, that's a huge margin of error. Huge. You could drive a truck through that margin of error. Okay. So this skill really isn't about being accurate. It's about knowing the steps and following the care plan. Okay. At the end of the skill, we have to document. Now, this skill is a little bit different than some of the other skills that we do because do you guys remember how many evaluators I said you have? 2. Well, the patient only has 2 arms. So you're on one side, and evaluator number 1 is on the other side. Evaluator number 2 has to be able to count with you too. So that means for this skill, you're going to have to count twice, once with each evaluator. And you don't have to do the whole opening twice. You don't have to do the whole closing twice. You're going to count with evaluator number 1. They're going to let you write that number down so you don't have to remember it. Okay, without doing your closing and washing your hands. They're just going to let you jot a note down. And then you'll count with evaluator number 2. Do your closing, wash your hands, and then document that one and wash your hands again. Good? Make sense? Good. All right, so let me show you what this looks like. I'm going to show you the video for this real quick. There's nothing to see here really on the video, to be honest with you. But you can kind of see how the whole thing works with the opening and the skill and the closing. But then we're going to do an activity in class where you're going to take the pulse. So hang tight. Let me just show you this video so you can see how the whole thing works with the opening and the closing.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. I need to get your vital signs. Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm going to close your curtain, wash my hands, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Jones. This will take me about a minute. I'll need you to remain quiet during that time, but I'll let you know as soon as I'm done, okay?
Okay.
Okay, ready? Start. Stop. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here?
No, ma'am.
Magazine, perhaps?
No, ma'am.
Okay, your call light is right here. If you should need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call.
Thank you.
I'm going to go wash my hands and document. And I'll document my findings. Review the steps of my skill and tell the evaluator my skill is done. You guys see how long a minute is? Oh my gosh. It is forever. And it really is forever for your patients. And patients, when they get anxious, tend to talk. Do you know what that's going to do to your count? Yeah, it'll distract you. You'll lose count. So what I like to tell my patients before I start this skill is, because I know I'm going to count for 1 full minute. My care plan told me I am. This is a very long time. Your patient's going to get nervous thinking, oh my gosh, I'm dying. Something is wrong with me. And that's going to make them anxious. What do you think anxiety is going to do to the heart rate? Make it go faster. So If I'm going to count for 1 full minute, I'm going to tell my patient, this is going to take me a full minute. So I'll need you to remain quiet during that time. Everything is okay, but I'll let you know as soon as I'm done. That way they expect that it's going to take a minute. They'll relax. They won't try to talk to me, and I can get my count down and done. If you just walk up to somebody, grab their wrist, and you're silent for 1 whole minute, they're going to freak out. What is wrong with me? Because it doesn't normally take a minute to take a pulse. Do you guys see how talking to your patients can really help you with what you're doing? All right, so we're going to now do this together, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is ask you, can I ask you to come over here and sit in this red chair for me, okay? And I'm going to ask you to come sit in this chair. Actually, sit in the white chair for me. Okay. So, I'm going to ask you to come sit in this chair. And I want you to come sit in this chair. There's a method to this, trust me. And you're good. I know you're buried back there, but can you come sit in this chair for me?
Just slide under the table.
Okay, so those of you who are playing along at home, we now have 4 stations with 3 people each. There are 2 people on one side of the table and 1 person on the other side of the table. So groups of 3, 2 on one side, 1 on the other. Okay. So the 1 person side, so you, and you. You are the patient. You're going to put both of your hands out on the table. Palm up. And then, so you're the patient. Yeah, you're the patient. And the other 2 people, you're going to find the pulse on the hand closest to you. So you're going to find the pulse. And when I say start, you're going to count the thumps under your finger until I say stop. And we're going to see if you 2 get the same reading. So go ahead and find the pulse. When you remember to put your thumb on the back. Remember, your thumb always goes on the back of the wrist. When you find the pulse, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. It's just a little bit harder. Press a little harder. Everybody ready? Are you good? Okay. All right. I'm going to do the timing for you. I will say start. You're going to count the thumps you feel under your finger until I say stop. That's your only job. Count the thumps. Ready, set, start. Stop. What'd you get? 90 and 109. Okay, that's fine.
72.
Okay.
I know.
Okay, very good, very good. So you guys see how this works? So you were the CNA being tested, and you were the evaluator. Okay, you were the CNA, you were the evaluator. So you guys see how this works? Okay. So now one of the people, the two, is the patient. So you're the patient, and you're the patient, and you're the patient, and you're the patient, and the person that was a patient is now the CNA. So, patients, put your arms on the table. Go ahead and put your arm on the table. Yep, both of them. Yep. So, you're going to find your pulse on this arm. You're going to find your pulse on my arm. Remember, your thumb goes underneath the wrist. Thumb goes underneath the wrist. When you have the pulse, say yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Are you right-handed?
Left.
You're left-handed? Okay. You need to be way up here at the top.
Good. That's what I felt too.
Are you right-handed? Got it? All right, everybody ready? Everybody ready? All right, ready, set, count. Stop.
I got 55.
55.
All right, so the last person is now the patient. And find the pulse. When you have the pulse, remember you want to be way up at the very top of the wrist. So you're right-handed. Right here. Put your thumb on the back.
No, I can't.
Way up here. More. Got it?
It's more easy.
A little bit harder. Got it?
Got it.
Okay, everybody. So relax. This wrist relaxed. Here, thumb on the back. Always thumb on the back. Always. Not so hard.
Okay.
Nothing.
You may have to press just a little bit harder.
All right.
If you're not picking it up at first, let me see. It's right here. Do you feel how hard I'm pressing? Okay, put your fingers right here. Thumbs down. Is she pressing as hard as I can right now?
Just looking at. It's very
Yeah. Yeah, hers isn't very strong. All right, everybody got a pulse? Ready? Set. Stop. Very good.
96.
Okay. What'd you get? Okay. Okay.
I got 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and resume your seats. You guys can turn the chairs around as you need to. Go ahead and resume your seats. So, oh, geez. I'm sorry. All right. So, do you guys have you were able to do a pulse twice, each of you, okay, on two different people. Did you notice that each pulse felt a little different? Some are really, really light. I mean, it really is hard to feel because they're so, the pulse is so light. Others are really strong. I mean, you can like, wow, I can feel that from across the room. You've got a good pulse. Some are very fast. Some are very slow. Everybody's pulse is going to feel just a little bit different. So I really want you to try to practice on a few different people over the weekend, not just one person over and over and over, because I want you to see just how different pulses can feel. Okay. But there is something that some of you noticed that I want to talk about when it comes to pulse. In some people, the pulse gets really fast and then slows back down, and then really fast and slows back down, and really fast and slows back down. That's actually very normal, and it has to do with space. So here I have a rib cage, which is all bone. I've got a sternum, which is bone. And I've got a spine in the back, which is bone. And inside this bone cage are two lungs and a heart. When my lungs inflate, they take up space. They're full of air, like a balloon, right? They're expanding, they're taking up space, and that squeezes the heart. So the heart goes, ah, and speeds up. And then when I exhale, the lungs deflate, the heart is able to kind of spread out again, and it goes, ah. So on inhalation, the heart rate can speed up, and on exhalation, the heart rate might slow down. Now, you're going to see this more often in children and in teeny tiny people because they don't have as much space in their rib cage. So it's more pronounced on people that are small and children. If we get a little bigger, or a little more space in there to move for the heart and lungs. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's not unusual. That's not unusual. So because it's considered normal, we don't have to report it. But if your heart rate goes something like this, right? A normal heart rate would sound like this. Pretty rhythmic, right? Now, if you're taking a pulse and it feels more like this, that needs to be reported. That is not anywhere near normal. And that usually indicates a condition called atrial fibrillation. AFib, or atrial fibrillation, is the main reason why we would have to count for 1 whole minute. Because if there's no rhythm to the heart rate, a 15-second count isn't going to help us because the next 15 seconds is not going to be the same. Okay. So AFib is the number one reason why you would have to take a manual pulse for 1 full minute. And you would want to report to the nurse that the pulse was very irregular. Good? Questions on pulse? Okay. So we're going to move on now to another skill. This is on page 102. This is dressing a resident with a weak arm. And now we're starting to get into some stuff, some skills. So if you're looking at page 102 and you look down the side here, there's a whole lot of principles that this skill is going to use. They're all spelled out for you here. We know glove rules. We know skill rules. We know the opening. We know glove rules. And then way down here, we know the closing. So these things in the middle have to be learned in order to learn this skill. Now, we're going to learn, we've already learned glove rules today. We're going to learn barrier and privacy blanket. We're going to learn a few things on linen rules, but we're going to come back to this one at a later date and fill in some gaps. Okay, so we're really kind of learning 2.5 because I don't want to overload you. It's only week 1, class 2. I don't want to scare you off. All right, so let me go back here real quick and let's talk about this. These are the short version of this particular skill. I have a video for it you can watch. And then down here is your test-specific information. So somebody with your level of experience, which is none, how long should you be able to complete this skill in? 14 minutes. Okay. And we're going to come back to this page in just a second. Okay. But let me, at the top of page 103 is the care plan. The care plan tells us to dress the resident in a long sleeve, button front, or snap front shirt, pants, and socks. Let's stop there for a second. We're putting on shirt, pants, and socks. How long do they give us to put on shirt, pants, and socks? I don't know about you, but it's never taken me 14 minutes to put on shirt, pants, and socks. It might take me 14 minutes to figure out which shirt, pants, and socks I want to wear. But it doesn't take me 14 minutes to put on shirt, pants, and socks. They are giving you way more time than you need to do all of these skills. And I need you to understand that so you don't try to rush through them. Because when you rush through the skills, that's when mistakes happen. You've got tons and tons and tons of time here. Now, there's some things we have to learn about this skill. There's some special considerations with this skill. But I want you to remember you've got plenty of time. Now, this skill is going to be a little different because we're going to be doing it on a mannequin. We're not dressing a real person. And that probably makes you feel much better, right? Because none of you want to be undressed for the test. So we're going to use a mannequin for this. But you're going to treat the mannequin just like you would a real person. You're going to talk to the mannequin. And the mannequin's going to answer you. It's actually the evaluators, but you're going to get an answer. Okay? So it's important to remember that even though it's a mannequin, they're grading our interaction as if it were a live person. Keep that in mind. All right, so let's learn these 3 principles. We're going to start with barrier. This is going to be located on page 84. And to the side here, you can see all of the skills that use a barrier. And man, there are a lot of skills that use a barrier. So we got to learn this one pretty well because we're going to be using it over and over and over again. There's a video for this on the website. Did all of you get your wrap-up email from class 1? You probably got it yesterday. I know I had a problem with my system. And did all of you get your notification that you were enrolled in the online course? Okay, because I've got lessons on this in the online course that'll help you. But there's a video you can watch. All right. So this is the lecture I'm going to give you on page 85. I took the notes. You don't have to take notes. I did that for you. But when we're going to do a skill, most skills require supplies. Most. There are a few that don't, but most skills require supplies. If we're going to use supplies, it means we got to have a place to put them. Now, in most cases, we're going to use a table like this, an overbed table. The problem is this overbed table is usually covered with a whole bunch of stuff. It's also used for meals. So is this table clean? No. So if we're going to put supplies on the table, we have to somehow create a clean space for those supplies. Otherwise, our supplies are going to get contaminated before we ever use them. And that's what a barrier is going to do. Now, I'm going to tell you, in a clinical setting, most of your tables are going to look like this, and you're going to have to carve out a small space. This is all the patient has access to, right? So everything that they use is going to go on this table. Carve out a little space for you. But for the test, they make it easy. Your tables are completely empty. So they make it really easy for us. Doesn't work like that in real life. So the supplies that we use for each patient are clean. And we're going to use a barrier to create a clean place for those clean supplies. So the table is not clean, but our supplies are. If we put a barrier on that table, now we have a clean place. So barriers are used to create a clean place for your clean supplies. Now, we talked about this earlier. Because the supplies the residents we're using on the residents are clean, we have to make sure that we're only touching those supplies with clean hands. And I actually started today by talking about that one of the most common mistakes on the test is to go get your supplies before you ever talk to your patient. You guys remember me saying that? We can't do that because if we touch those supplies with unclean hands, it could fail us. More importantly, it's breaking our whole chain of infection. Okay. All right. So we wash our hands and then we go get the supplies. So only touch supplies with clean hands. But those supplies cannot touch your uniform. Your uniform is not clean once you start work. It's pressed up against the table. It's leaned against the bed. The curtain has brushed up against you. It's leaned against the sink. You've probably knelt on the floor to do foot care or empty the drainage bag. Your uniform is not considered clean once you start work. So if you get those supplies and you hold them right up next to you, your uniform, you've contaminated those supplies before you ever start working with the patient. So we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of that and not let those supplies touch our uniform. But this becomes a problem for the test. And let me show you what I mean. A picture really is worth 1,000 words. Okay. So let's say that I'm doing a skill. It's making an occupied bed. That's a good one. Or maybe I'll do a partial bed bath. So if I'm over here, I've done my opening, knock, knock, knock. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. I'm here to whatever the skill is. Partial bed bath. Let's just pick on that one. Is that okay? Close curtain, wash my hands. I now have clean hands. And I'm over here at the supply shelf to get the things that I need. Now, partial bed bath are a ton of supplies. I need 4 washcloths. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I need 2 towels. 1, 2. I need a privacy blanket. I need a patient gown. We'll just pretend. Patient gown. I need a chucks to put it all on. And I need a set of gloves and a basin and soap and lotion. That's a lot of supplies, right? Yes, you have to learn your supplies. No way around it. But I got all of this. So I washed my hands and I went and got my supplies. Now I have to put a barrier on the table. So if I put the barrier down, I have to have 2 hands to spread it out. So what do you think I'm going to end up doing? Is my uniform clean? And we do it without thinking about it. So in order to make this work, we don't go get all of our supplies at one time. We go get the barrier. We go get the barrier. We're going to put it on the table with the absorbent side, the white side facing up. And then I go get the rest of my supplies and bring them over and put them on the barrier. You guys are going to try to shortcut this. I know you are. That's why I make a big deal out of this, because it is a big deal. If it's my mom in the bed, do you think I want contaminated supplies used on her? So we have to be aware of where infections occur and what we can do to prevent it. So when we're getting a barrier, we go get the barrier first before we get our supplies. That way, the supplies don't touch our uniform. Okay. Remember, you've leaned against everything in that environment. So don't try to get the barrier when getting the rest of your supplies, because you have to spread the barrier onto the table, and it takes 2 hands to do that. You can't have your supplies touch your uniform. So we're going to go get the barrier first, put it on the table, go get the rest of our supplies, and then put those on the table. No, because all you're touching are clean items. So everything on that shelf is clean. Now we're going to get to that in just a minute, because there's a caveat to that. We're going to get to that in a minute, but everything on there is clean. Think of it like an ATM, right? You can take out. Can't put anything back though. So if you take a supply out, you can't put it back on the shelf. So we know, because of that rule, we know everything on there is clean. So we'll get a barrier, put it out on our table, go get our supplies, because we still have clean hands, and put those on the table. Okay, good? Got barrier rules? You're going to see this over and over and over again, because we use a barrier for almost all the skills we do. So you're going to see it over and over. So now let's move on to the privacy blanket. Dignity is essential, and so is privacy. Now, we all know about privacy curtains. We close the curtain before we do skills. We know about that. But the privacy curtain only protects the patient from being seen by people out there. Keep that in mind. The other thing that we have to remember is that our perception of temperature and our patients are going to be vastly different. I am up moving around, running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I've got way more to do than I can possibly get done. I am running nonstop. I am also fully dressed. What do you think the temperature feels like in here to me? Warm. Our patient is laying in bed, not active at all, dressed in a thin hospital gown with a sheet on them. What does the temperature feel like to them? Yeah, now take their sheet away. Right, we keep healthcare settings cold. Remember I said that pathogens need a very narrow temperature window, right? We keep healthcare settings cold for a reason. But that makes our patient really uncomfortable. So if we're going to take that sheet away from our patient to be able to do a skill, we want to give them something else to cover up with, to not just control their temperature, but also to provide a little bit of dignity and modesty as well. Because the curtain will help protect them from everybody out there, but inside the curtain is still a stranger. Now, we tend to forget that. For us, it's just a routine part of our day. We've given 14 bed baths today. Yours is no different. I've seen one. I've seen them all. I don't care, right? That's how our mindset works. But do you think that they care that we've seen 14 today? Not when it comes to theirs. Okay. So remember that you are still the stranger in the room with the patient. Closing the privacy curtain doesn't do anything to protect them from you. One of the things I really want to do, if I ever get spare time in my life, is create a podcast for medical professionals that have behaved badly. There is a shocking number of them. You are a medical professional inside an enclosed space with a vulnerable patient. They need protection from you. Okay? Good. Don't assume that all healthcare workers are good. Do you know one of the worst cases was in Citrus County? Do you guys know that?
What was it? I lived there.
One of the worst cases of medical abuse was in Citrus County. It was a male nurse in the recovery room after surgery who was raping his female patients while they were still under anesthesia. Yep. Yeah. And I believe there were 9 confirmed victims and something like 14 or 15 unconfirmed. He's in prison. He did escape once, but they caught him. He's a very bad man. But don't assume that your patient feels safe and secure with you. And they really shouldn't. You are a stranger. Stranger danger is real. Privacy curtains do not protect the patient from you. Promoting dignity is essential. So we're going to have a principle here that we're going to use. Anytime the patient is uncovered or undressed, we need a privacy blanket. It's going to provide an extra layer of protection to keep the patient warm and provide privacy. This is something we should know. It's not going to be on the care plan. No care plan in the world is going to tell you to use a barrier. No care plan in the world is going to tell you to knock on the door. No care plan in the world is going to tell you to use a privacy blanket. Everything that we're learning on that back wall is something a CNA has to know. It's not on the care plan. Okay, good. That's why we call them principles. Another name for it is best nursing practices, but principles is easier. Okay, so when we put the blanket on, we're going to put it on over the sheet and then pull that sheet down underneath the blanket. That way the patient's always covered with something. Otherwise, if we just take the sheet completely off and then put the blanket on, the patient's uncovered for that period of time, which makes them uncomfortable. So it goes on over the sheet and the sheet gets pulled down underneath. But when we're putting that blanket on, we don't snap it or shake it. I do this when I make my bed at home, right? You do one of these things with your sheet, you kind of snap it to spread it all out, right? Well, if you put powder on the bed and you snap that sheet, you'll notice that the powder all comes right up here where you can breathe it in, and then you start coughing and hacking and all kinds of stuff. When you snap a sheet or blanket, it brings up everything that's on that bed. And patients shed skin cells, yeast, bacteria, all kinds of pathogens. You don't want to bring those patient pathogens right here where you can breathe them in. Remember, this is a portal of entry. So we don't snap or shake our sheets and blankets. We simply unfold. Okay? Good. At the end of the skill, this is going to mess you up. At the end of the skill, you don't remove the privacy blanket with your gloves on. Remember, the patient has to remain covered at all times. So that means that we've got to pull the sheet up before we take that blanket away. That sheet is going to end right near their face. And remember, most of the holes in our body are right here. So if we have soiled gloves on and we pull that sheet right up next to their face, we're transferring pathogens right to where the portals of entry are. Good. So we're going to do all of our cleanup, dispose of everything we need to dispose of, clean whatever we need to clean, and then we're going to take our gloves off and pull the sheet up and remove the blanket. At the end of the skill, you should never remove a blanket with your gloves on. Okay? And then after you do that, you go wash your hands. So we've learned privacy blanket. These aren't too painful, are they? So now we're going to get into the last one. We're not going to learn this whole one. We're going to learn part of it. But this is linen rules. And again, linen rules are going to be found in a lot of different skills. But what makes linen rules kind of unique is that most of these are repeats of something we've already learned. It's a repeat. Now, if something is repeated on more than one principle, that means it's going to count doubly important on the exam. All your notes are on page 87. Linens cannot touch uniform. Well, we know that. We learned that already. But that means that it's a double count deficiency. If you let linens touch your uniform, it's going to count really big on the state exam. It sounds like such a small thing, but it counts really big. You have to have clean hands to get your linens. Yeah, we know that one too. So those students that go into the room and get their linens before they do their opening, guys, that could fail you because you're touching the linens with unclean hands. Be careful. It counts big. So principles that are repeated are doubly important. They're going to count against you on the state exam. Do not shake or snap linens. We already know that one too. So again, this is a doubly important principle. Things that you wouldn't think are going to count really big against you actually do. And it's all about infection control. And then we're going to skip a couple and go to the end. Unused items must be discarded. So remember I talked, it's like the ATM. So if we take too many washcloths or too many towels, you can't just leave them in the room for later. You can't ever put them back in your clean linen because once it's removed, it doesn't go back. We can't trust that you didn't contaminate those linens. But you can't leave it in the patient's room either. When we put linens in a patient's room for later, they're out of our sight. What could happen to those linens when they're out of your sight? Oh yeah, anything. Absolutely anything. Anything. Now, I'll give you a good example of this. Patient's wife comes in with a cup of coffee for her and her husband. Her husband's in the hospital bed. And as she comes in, she trips over his oxygen tubing and spills some of the coffee on the floor. Oops, that's, not a big deal. But she looks around and she sees a washcloth and a towel on a stack on the chair. And she grabs one of the washcloths and cleans up the coffee so nobody steps in it. And it's very nice. Thank you very much. But there's no dirty linen containers in patient's room. We don't keep dirty things in rooms. So where does she put the dirty washcloth? Well, she's going to fold it up and put it back on the stack because she doesn't know what else to do with it. It happens all the time. So you can't trust anything outside of your sight to be clean. We don't leave linens in a room for later. Okay? We're going to learn the rest of linen rules in a future lesson coming up. But we've learned what we need to learn for this next skill. You good? So now we can learn dressing a resident with a weak arm. So these are all of the checkpoints for this particular skill, dressing a resident for the weak arm. And if you look at this, you can see there's a whole lot of green and there's a whole lot of red. And there's very few that aren't colored in. These few that aren't colored in are things related specifically to dressing a resident. But if you don't do the opening, look how many check marks you miss. If you don't do the closing, look how many check marks you miss. You guys see that? Purple one is, scoot and roll. We're going to talk about that in a future lesson. I'm going to touch on it in just a minute. We'll talk about it in a future lesson, but scoot and roll. Basically, the patient needs to be in the middle of the bed at all times. You've heard me say that. So I'm just going to touch on that a little bit. We're going to get into that in detail next week. I got a whole lecture on that for you. Okay, so if all these principles are kind of freaking you out, if all these supplies are kind of freaking you out, and if all these steps are kind of freaking you out, remember the flashcards are there to help you. You can see what they look like. This is the classroom copy. You guys can all take a look at these. These are always up here for you guys during practice. You can take a look through them. They're for the classroom to use. If you want your own, remember they're only $14.99. If you want to make your own, this will give you a good idea of how to do that. Okay. So now let's look at the specific steps for this skill. And there's lots of things that we're going to cover here. None of them are too hard. I'm going to get through them pretty quickly. But in order to understand all of this, these are things that aren't covered by the other principles. But in order to understand this, we have to look at that care plan. Okay. So the care plan on page 103 tells us our patient's going to be lying in bed for the skill, dress the resident in a snap or button front shirt, long sleeve shirt, pants and socks, and the resident is unable to help with dressing. Resident has a weak arm. One of the things I'm going to have to do when I do this skill, though, when I'm helping somebody get dressed, is ask them what they want to wear. Patients have the right to choose their own clothing. We all choose our own clothing, and it's kind of an outward reflection of how I feel that day. If I'm feeling kind of down and icky, I might wear sweatpants and a big sloppy t-shirt. If I'm feeling kind of cute, I might throw on a dress, right? We dress how we feel. Well, your patients have the right to do that too. But the problem here, and it is a problem, is that your care is judged by how your patient looks. If as a nurse, I'm walking down a hallway and I see a whole bunch of people lined up in wheelchairs and all of them don't match, they got on mismatched socks, mismatched shoes, their hair is all messed up, their shirts aren't buttoned correctly. Do I have good CNAs? No. I am going to judge you and your care based on how those patients look. So, and remember, I'm liable for those patients. So if my patients don't look good, I'm coming after you because I'm the one that's liable for that. So when your patient, we're going to ask the patient, what do you want to wear today? When they describe something that does not go together, you know, like purple plaid pants and a yellow flower, this does not go together. I can suggest an alternative. Would you like your white shirt with those pants? That would look really nice. Or would you like your yellow pants with that shirt? That would look really nice together. You can suggest an alternative, but we're always going to honor their wishes. If they go, no, I want my yellow shirt and my purple plaid pants, no problem, I'll get that for you. Now, that we don't know. We have no idea. But maybe their daughter bought the shirt and their son bought the pants and they're both coming to visit today. Can happen. Or maybe today is bingo and that is her lucky shirt. Maybe. So we can suggest an alternative, but ultimately we're going to honor their wishes. Good? Good? All right. So we're going to go get the barrier and we're going to go get the clothes that they describe. Now, when you take the test, you're going to have a shelving unit like this. On the shelving unit is going to be 2 outfits. One of them will be a pullover shirt, you know, like a t-shirt. The other will be a snap front shirt. What does our care plan say we need to have? Snap or button front. You got to make sure you get the right one because on the shelf is going to be 2 shirts. They're seeing, are you going to follow that care plan? Okay. So we're going to ask the patient what they want to wear. We'll get our barrier. We're going to get the clothing that they've described. And we want to minimize exposure for this patient. So we want to get that clothing before we undress them. How uncomfortable would it be for the patient for them to be completely naked, laying in bed, waiting for you to come back with their clothes? So we want to minimize exposure. Always ask them what they want to wear and get their clothing before you undress them. So we'll close the privacy curtain. We're going to use a privacy blanket. We're going to get the clothes before we undress them. And that's how we're going to help protect their dignity. Anytime we lift an extremity, you know, like a leg to put the sock on or an arm to put the shirt on, you always support from below with a flat palm. So like this, I'm going to lift from below. We're not the claw machine at Walmart. We're not going to do this, right? Grab on and lift. When we do that, our fingertips actually bite into the patient's skin and it can hurt them. It can leave bruises. It can actually cause nerve damage in some cases. So we always lift from below. This is how we're going to dress and undress somebody with a weak arm. And our care plan tells us our patient does have a weak arm. We've got to pay attention to which one. And we're going to use this, USA First. USA First stands for undress, strong, arm, first. USA, undress, strong, arm, first. When we do that, when we undress the strong arm, that means, so let's say my right arm is weak, doesn't move real well. Maybe I have a bad shoulder. By undressing the strong arm first, I'm making that arm do all the work, right? I'm pulling it through the sleeve. I'm making it do all the work. And then the garment just falls right off the weak arm. Not a lot of motion required. Now, when I'm going to dress that weak side first so I can pull the item up without a lot of motion required and make the stronger arm do all the work to finish dressing. So undress strong arm first, dress weak arm first. Okay. So when we're putting clothes on a weak arm, be very careful. Don't overextend movement. Make sure that you're supporting, try to minimize pain whenever possible. Don't cause injury. Oh, let me go back here. Do you see this blanket? So I'm dressing this resident, right? She has no clothes on. I put her pants on, but I got to get that gown off. Now I could just walk up and take the gown off and let her, just kind of be out there all natural, but she may not be comfortable with that. I wouldn't be comfortable with that. You're a stranger. So you can use that privacy blanket, tuck it up behind their shoulders. It creates a drape. It gives you access to both arms. Dressing is super easy. I can dress this lady without ever exposing her, ever. And this is a really good technique to learn because it helps promote dignity. And some of your patients aren't going to care. They're going to go, I don't care. That's fine, but this is our default. Okay. Your care is judged by how your patients look. So make sure the buttons are buttoned appropriately. The pants are up over the hips. The toe seams on the socks line up across the toes. We really want our patient to look good. Now, at the end of the skill, you're going to bundle up the blanket and the patient gown and everything that came off of that bed, and you're going to put it directly into dirty linen. Now, we're going to talk about dirty linen next week. But for the test, you're going to have a hamper similar to this or a laundry basket, and you're going to make sure those items go directly in the hamper or basket. Never, ever put dirty items on the floor. Super important. Never, ever put dirty items on the floor. All right. Call light is going to go in their stronger hand because they have to be able to use it. So you're going to pay attention on this care plan to which arm is weak because that's going to dictate how we undress and dress. And we want to make sure the call light ends up in the stronger hand at the end of the skill. So page 103 gives you step-by-step instructions on exactly how to get this skill done. Our care plan is at the very top. It says to dress the resident in a long sleeve button or snap front shirt, pants, and socks. The resident is lying in bed and has a weak right arm. Now for the test, it could say left arm. Pay attention to your care plan. But this one is weak right arm. The resident is not able to help with dressing, and after dressing, leave the resident in bed. So we've got 29 steps here, so it's easier than a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, by far. You've got a couple of practice questions or knowledge questions here. If you can answer those questions, you have the information you need to do this skill successfully. And along the bottom, you'll see your supplies. There aren't very many supplies for this one. So these are the skill-specific steps here. As long as you hit all of these, you do your opening, evaluate gloves and do your closing, you'll be fine. So I'm going to show you the video for this one. Pay attention to how I talk to the mannequin. Hello, Mrs. Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you? Good. I'm here to help you get dressed. Is that okay? Okay, I'm going to close your curtain. Let me go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. The first thing that I'll get is a barrier to put on my table to make sure that my supplies remain clean. Mrs. Jones, what would you like to wear today? Your light pink pants and dark pink shirt? Okay. Is this the outfit that you described? Wonderful. I'll get a privacy blanket as well. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to spread this privacy blanket out over you. This will keep you warm and help protect your privacy as we do this skill. I'm going to carefully unfold the blanket, being careful not to snap or shake it as I lay it out over you. Once the blanket's in place, I'll pull your sheet down to the end of the bed. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to place your socks on now. We'll take one of the socks, scrunch it all the way up to the toe seam, put it over the foot, making sure the toe seam is lined up, lift from below and support at the ankle, and smooth the sock over the heel. Now we'll go to the other side. We'll scrunch this sock up, put it over the foot, making sure the toe seam is lined up, lift from below and support at the ankle, and smooth the sock over the heel, minimizing wrinkles. Now we'll help you put your pants on. We're going to make sure the tag is in the back. I'm going to insert one of my arms into the legs of the pants and scrunch it up so I have control over all the material. We'll then place it over your foot, lift from below, and smooth it over your heel. We're going to repeat on this side. I'm going to put my hand inside to scrunch up the leg of the pants, and then place it over your foot, lifting from below and supporting at the heel while we finish putting on your pants. Okay, Mrs. Jones, now I'm going to lift your pants up over your hips. If I can have you raise up your hips as high as you can on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I'll make sure that your pants are over your hips and then cover you back up. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to elevate the head of the bed now. Please tell me when you're comfortable. And if I can assist you to lean forward, I'll untie your gown. Thank you. I'm going to tuck a corner of the blanket behind your back as you sit back. And now I'll remove the gown from this side. We're going to undress the strong arm first. Since our care plan indicated your right arm is weak, we'll undress your left arm first. I'm going to the other side of the bed now. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to undress this arm. Being careful to minimize the movement and support the arm at the elbow as I lift it off the bed. We'll remove the soiled gown. We'll go ahead and rest your arm back on the bed. Okay, now I'm going to assist you with your shirt. I'm going to scrunch up the arm of the sleeve and put my hand through backwards, keeping your arm supported on the bed. I'm going to lift your hand and hold it as if we're shaking hands. This will keep all your fingers together as we place the sleeve over my hand and then over yours. Once we have the sleeve in place on your arm, We'll extend your arm out. I'll support at the elbow as I bring the sleeve the rest of the way along your arm. If I can have you sit forward, Miss Jones, let me assist you. Thank you. Make sure that you remain covered and smooth the shirt along your back. Come on back, Mrs. Jones. Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to assist you in putting your other arm in your sleeve. So I'll scrunch it up, put my hand in through backwards. And Miss Jones, if I could have you reach your arm up and back for me. I'll assist you to put your arm in the sleeve. Okay, Miss Jones, we'll rest your arm back on the bed now while I straighten your shirt and make sure that it is snapped appropriately. Okay, let me just adjust your clothing to make sure it's neat. Can I have you lean forward for me, please? Thank you. And I'll make sure that this blanket can be removed. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm just going to gather up your privacy blanket and place it in soiled linen along with your gown. I'll be right back. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm just going to adjust your clothing for neatness and appearance and make sure that it's fastened appropriately and that you look good. Very nice. Okay, you have your call light here if you should need anything. Can I get a magazine for you? Okay, I'm just going to throw your barrier away and open your privacy curtain. Now we'll go wash my hands. After washing my hands, I'll think about the steps of my skill, make any corrections, and then tell the evaluator my skill is done. Give me 1 second here, guys. Someone was asking me a question about the online course. All right, any questions on helping somebody get dressed?
So in the video, you didn't put gloves on.
Okay, so let's talk about that. For this patient, there were no incisions, sores, rashes, or wounds. It's a mannequin. Okay. I'm not touching any personal skin, breasts, genitals, because I'm not putting on underwear or bra. I'm pants, socks, shirt. And there's no body fluids. So do I need gloves? What do you think? No, I don't. I'm going to wash my hands before I do the skill. I'm going to wash my hands after I do the skill. So any pathogens I might have come into contact, do pathogens drill through the skin? No. So any pathogens I might have come into contact with are going to be washed away. So there's no need for gloves for this one. Now, that would change if the patient is incontinent. If they're incontinent, that means that urine flows out freely. I would then be contacting body fluids. So would I need gloves? Okay, if I was going to put on a bra or underwear for this patient, now I'm in their personal area, right? So gloves. If the patient had an incision that I was going to be near, would I need gloves? Sure. But this patient doesn't have any of that. And remember, it's really important that it's the care plan, the whole care plan, and nothing but the care plan. We can't put in those ifs. Remember, we talked about that first thing today? Be careful not to add the ifs. So if your brain says, well, if they were incontinent, but they're not, because if they were, the care plan would have told us. Or if they have an incision, but they're not. Or if they have dementia, but they don't. Remember, we go by the information provided and only the information provided. Does that help you? Okay. Any other questions?
Do you have to say everything you're doing during the
Great question. Yeah, great question. So before I showed you the video, I told you to pay attention to how I talk to the patient, right? So ideally, yes. You don't have to say it word for word, but ideally, yes. Because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be doing this together. It's not me doing it on her. We're supposed to be doing this together. I'm helping her. Now, that's an important distinction because if I just walk in and treat her like I'm there to do stuff to her, it's a different power dynamic, isn't it? If I go in and I'm there to help her, well, she'll be much more cooperative. But if I go in there like I'm going to do it to her, she's actually likely to be very resistant. Do you guys see the difference there? So the more you talk to your patient, the more you explain to them what you're doing, the more cooperative they actually become. Now, this becomes really important when we start going through their drawers to get stuff, right? Supplies that we need, because their wallet is in there, their wedding rings are in there. They need to know why I'm in their drawers. I don't just get to walk into your drawers, your house at 6 o'clock in the morning and start going through all your drawers. I mean, that would be a huge invasion of privacy. Just because our patients are in our settings doesn't give us the right to do any of that. So the more we involve them, the more we explain to them, the more we tell them what we're doing, the more cooperative they become and the more of a partner they become in their care. Now, the other reason that you should do this for the test, there's 2 reasons actually, is if you remember on Monday, I told you that when the evaluators are grading you, they've got that checklist, right? So when you're doing a step, oh, here, let me get this one. Oops, come back. Okay, when you are doing a step, there's 2 evaluators and they have this checklist in front of them and they actually have a pen and they mark on the checklist when you do something. So your evaluators have this checklist. You're over there doing a step. They have to look here to mark that you did a step. So now you're on the next step. You're not waiting for them to do that. You've moved on. You're on the next step. So is it possible they might miss that next step because they're checking one off here? Do you guys see how that works? If you talk each step out loud, even though they might be looking here, they're going to give you credit for it. So should you talk the steps out loud? Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the other reason you want to do that is because it helps you. It helps you. When you start talking these steps out loud and you start reciting them, you'll start remembering what comes next, especially if you have done that to prepare for the test. If you've read those steps out loud to yourself, particularly if you go to the top of page 102, that little gray box, right? If you read those out loud to yourself over and over and over again, it's what's on the flashcards too. Read that out loud over and over and over again. You'll start to remember what comes next. And that will help you on the test not forget steps. So there's 3 good reasons why we have to talk these skills out. 1 is for the patient, 1 is for the test, and 1 is for us. Great question. I actually have a video on that in the online course. Do I have to talk it out? All right, so let's get to our last skill for today. This is on page 76. Oh, this is a quick and easy skill. These are my favorite. I love range of motion skills. Okay, so if you look down the side here, you can see all the principles. They're spelled out here. So there's skill rules. We know that. We follow the care plan. There's the opening. Every opening starts with a knock. We have to evaluate if we need gloves. We may not. It depends on the patient. And we have to do the closing because every skill ends the same way. So the only thing we really need to learn now, because we know all of those things, the only thing we really need to learn now is the things related to the actual range of motion skill. I have a video on this. Along the bottom here, how much time do you have, somebody with your level of experience, to perform this skill? 4 minutes. Now I'm going to tell you that's way, 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 way more time than you need. So the skill is really only about a minute long. I like range of motion skills. They're super quick, super easy. And you got a pretty high chance of getting one of them. So that's pretty cool. There's 3 of them. We're going to learn the first one now. But we kind of have to learn what range of motion is before I can teach you how to do it. So the first thing that we have to think about is, why are these exercises being ordered? Now, in a healthcare facility, we tend to default to this. This is what we think. If I told you we're going to do exercises on a patient, you automatically think we're doing exercises to make the patient better, to improve something. That is where your mind goes, because it's healthcare. We want to make patients better. That is not why we do exercises. There's a whole department that does exercises to make people better. You know what that is? Physical therapy. Yeah. Physical therapists have to have a doctorate degree, 10 to 12 years of training to learn how to do exercises to make people better. How long are we here? That is not us. Ever. Even physical therapy assistants, it's a 2-year degree. How long are we here? 4 weeks. Not us. We do not do exercises to improve anything. That's not what we do. So you can think of this as regain or retain. Physical therapy department does exercises to regain strength, muscle, balance, ability. CNAs do exercises to retain strength, muscle, balance, mobility. So we're just trying to keep what they've got. Now, the reason is, I told my mom this years and years and years ago, and she actually remembers this. Every time she goes to the hospital, she mentions it. When you go to the I don't care what age you are, when you go to a hospital or to a rehab, or you are an inpatient somewhere, it takes on average 3 days to recover for every day you are in a clinical setting. So if we got somebody that spent a day in the hospital, it's going to take them 3 days to recover. If they were in the hospital a week, it's going to take them 3 weeks to recover. That's a long time. Now, the reason for that is because when you are home, you are active. You're way more active than you think you are. Even if you're a couch potato, you're still active, because you get up and you go to the bathroom. You get up and you get your meals. You get up and you go to the mailbox. You get up and you go to the grocery store, right? You have a routine, right? And most of us are a little more active than that. When you go into a healthcare setting, you are not active. She hasn't moved a bit. You are not active. It doesn't take long for the muscles to start to have an effect from that inactivity. And there's a lot of really bad things that happen to us when we are inactive. So if the patient can't engage in some sort of activity on their own, it's up to us through the care plan to do some exercises on them to help promote muscle strength and balance and mobility. But we are only doing things the patient can already do. So if we get to here and the patient says, ow, we're going to stop there. And the next one goes below the ow. Now, physical therapy would go, oh, no pain, no gain. Let's keep going, right? That's their job. That's not our job. We go below the ow. And then we go find a nurse and say, hey, we got to here and got ow. And let the nurse figure it out. Not our job, right? Good? Make sense? So as a CNA, we look for signs of pain. We're watching for wincing and grimacing and stiffening up and pulling away and all the things that would, all the things that would let us know that there's pain there. We don't want pain. We go below the pain. We are just trying to maintain what the patient already has so they don't have this prolonged recovery at the end of this. Make sense? Probably the saddest thing, I've been a nurse a long time in a lot of settings. And one of the saddest things, this is why I actually went from ICU to hospice. I was tired of doing CPR on 90-year-old people because the families didn't understand it wasn't a magic reset button. You know, they thought the patient would come back and be fine. You know, whatever killed them is still going to kill them. It's how life works. So I really was really frustrated with the lack of education for patients and families. I mean, somebody should be talking to these people. And in hospice, it gave me the chance to do that. So I really love the patient education aspect of it. But one of the things that I noticed when I was working in the ICU is it only took on average 2 days of bed rest to make an older person bedridden for the rest of their lives. 2 days. So if you've got an older patient in a hospital bed in the ICU and you don't get them up and move them in 2 days, they may not ever get out of that bed. Ever. The rest of their lives, they will be bedbound. And we did that to them. Not disease process. Not whatever's going on with them. That is 100% us. Now that's horrible. That's a whole lot of power to have over somebody else's life. That's horrible. We have to do better than that. And that's what range of motion is all about, is maintaining the patient's present level of ability so that we don't make them bedbound and they can continue to have a somewhat independent life when this is all over with. Does that make sense? Good. So let's learn how to do range of motion. So there's 2 types of range of motion. There's active and passive. Active range of motion is if I asked all of you to extend your right arm over your head like you're asking a question. Can you do that? Extend your right arm over your head like you're asking a question. Go ahead, reach for the sky. Yeah, right arm. Yeah, keep those elbows nice and straight. Awesome. Bring that down in front of you. Good job. Now that is active range of motion. I told you what to do. I critiqued it, made sure your form was good, prompted you, made sure it was being done. Because if I just tell you to do it, you're not going to do it. So I got to make sure it's being done. That's active range of motion. The patient does it, but we're prompting it, critiquing it. Passive range of motion, something else. Passive range of motion is when I'm doing it on the patient because they can't do it themselves. So first thing we have to know is what kind of range of motion are we doing? We're doing active or are we doing passive? For the test, it will be passive. We're going to do the motions. So now we have to think about what kind of exercises we do as CNAs. So when we are doing range of motion, there's a whole lot of green and a whole lot of red and very little white. So very little we have to learn to do this skill. And some of the things that we are going to learn is how to do these 3 motions, because there's only 3 as CNAs that we can do. We're always going to support the joints from below with a flat palm. We've heard that already. We're going to move slowly and smoothly and return all the way to the start position. It's got to be a full range of motion all the way back to start. Move slow. And these are the 3 exercises that we are going to learn how to do. Flexion extension, you guys just did. In fact, I asked you to extend your arm above your head like you're asking a question. That is extension. Bring it back down. That's flexion. It's 2 halves of the same exercise. Extension, flexion. Flexion is a bending of a body part. If you look, my shoulder is bent. Flexion is a straightening of my body part. If you look, my shoulder is now straight. Okay. So our shoulders are always in the flexed position. That's our natural position. Now, my knees, just the opposite, right? This is extended. It's straight. This is flexed. It's bent, right? So shoulders naturally flexed, knees naturally extended. So flexion, extension, two halves of the same exercise. Then there's abduction, adduction. Now, abduction, when you abduct a child, you take it away from its family. Don't do that. That's bad. But when you abduct an extremity, you also take it away from its family. So abduction would be to bring the arm out to the side all the way up and then bring it down back to start. Now, if you look at my hand, watch where my hand ends. Okay, so this is abduction, adduction, but you saw where my hand ended, right? Now, this is extension and flexion. My hand ends at the same place, but it is facing a different direction. That actually works different muscles. So even though this and this get my hand to the same place, it's going to work different muscles to get it there. Good? Makes sense? So again, just like flexion, extension, two halves of the same exercise. One gets you there, the other gets you back. Abduction, adduction, two halves of the same exercise. One gets you there, the other gets you back. Good? Now we've got rotation. Rotation is one because it's a full around. You always end up where you start, right? Rotation. Now, not all joints can move in all directions. Elbows, they only move in one direction. An elbow will only go up and down. If you get an elbow to do anything other than this, you broke it. Okay? Elbows don't do rotation. But my wrist does. My wrist goes up and down. My wrist goes side to side. My wrist goes all the way around. So not all joints can move in all directions. How would we, as a CNA, know which of these exercises we should do on which joints? Say it. Say it louder. The care plan. So all we're going to do is read our care plan and do exactly what it tells us to do. But we have to know how to do these exercises in order to make that happen. Okay? Good? Okay, this is our care plan. Provide the following range of motion exercise to the resident's left shoulder. Flexion, extension, remember that's up, down. And abduction, adduction, remember that's side to side. Provide 3 repetitions of each exercise, and the resident is not able to help with the exercises. That's it. That's the whole skill. So we're going to do our opening. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. I'm here to do some exercises on your, which shoulder? Left shoulder. Now that's the patient's left, not mine.
Here's what I found.
No, stop. Stop.
Will you marry me?
No. Okay, so the patient's left, not mine. Now this gets a little confusing because your patient's laying in bed. Their right and left is opposite of yours when you're facing them. So make sure that you're doing this on the correct side. If we get this wrong, it can have effects on the patient. There's a reason why they don't want the right shoulder done. Maybe there's a blood clot. Maybe there's a surgery. Maybe, I don't know. I don't need to know. But I got to make sure I get this right. Okay. So the patient's left shoulder. So in order to do range of motion, we need to know which joints, which exercises, and how many repetitions, and then we just follow that care plan. Remember, you have 4 minutes to do this. So let me try this again. You need to not. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. I'm here to do range of motion, or I'm here to do exercises. However you want to say it is fine. Is that okay? I'm going to close your curtain, wash my hands, and I'll be right back. There's no supplies for this. So I don't need a barrier. I don't need to go get anything. So I just go wash my hands. When I come back, I'm going to lift the patient's arm, and this is their left arm, up and all the way back down. But I'm only going to go to the point of pain or resistance. Okay. So if they get to here and they wince, I'm not going to go past that. But remember, you're doing this on another testing student, another one of you guys. So chances are you'll be able to go all the way up. And then you'll bring it back down. Remember, we always return to start. We're going to support from below as we do this. We're going to go all the way up and all the way back down slowly and smoothly. We'll do that 3 times. Then we're going to bring the arm out to the side and back in slowly and smoothly. And we'll do that 3 times. And then we'll do our closing. Thank you very much, Miss Jones. Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here? Are you comfortable? Your bed's in a low position. Your environment's clean and safe. Here's your call light. If you need anything at all, let me know. I'm going to open the curtain, go wash my hands. I'll probably read that care plan one more time just to make sure I did everything I was supposed to do. And then I'll tell the evaluator my skill is done. Okay, good. Questions? Somebody go over and lay in that bed for me.
Yes, I'll volunteer.
Thank you. Okay, so these are our important points, skill specific. Support the extremity near the joints, lift from below with a flat palm, move slowly and smoothly, return all the way to the start position. Flexion extension is up, down. Abduction, adduction is side to side. Rotation is around. And ask about pain or discomfort. So I'm actually going to leave, I know it's a little off center, but I'm actually going to leave it like this because you guys need to be able to see the left side, and that is her left shoulder. Okay. So can I get you to put your arms to the side for me? Let me get you comfy. Hold on. I can't stand it when people look uncomfortable. Lift your head up for a second. Okay. Better or too much? Okay. All right. Here we go. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you?
I'm good.
Great. I need to do some exercises on your left shoulder. Is that okay? All right. I'm going to close your curtain. Let me go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. I don't know why the bed is so far this way. All right. So I'm actually going to go wash my hands so that I can walk you through it. But for the test, after your first skill is done, you're going to be told you can simulate hand washing. So you would just say, I am washing my hands now. You don't physically have to go to the sink. You don't have to turn the water on. You don't have to pretend. You can just say, I would wash my hands here. Good? But I'm going to walk you through it so that you can get used to hand washing. All right, so over here at the sink, I know you guys can't see me. I'm sorry, at home. Over here, I'm going to turn the water on, wet my hands, get lots of soap, and I'm going to look at the clock. I'm going to rub my hands together. I'm going to rub the tops of my wrists, the backs of my hands, in between my thumb and index finger, the palm of my hand, and in between my fingers. So all areas for at least 20 seconds. That's 20 seconds right there. I'm going to go down each one of my nails with my thumb. I'm going to circle my nails on my palm to clean underneath, and then I'm going to rinse. I'm going to tap to keep the water confined to the sink, and then get whatever paper towels I need. I'm only going to dry what's clean. I'm going to throw that away. Get a clean dry paper towel to turn the faucet off. All right, Miss Jones, I'm going to do all the work. All you have to do is let me know if there's any pain or discomfort as we do this, okay? Now, this bed is low. Thankfully, I'm pretty short. I don't have to bend a whole lot. Some of you taller people might find this a little uncomfortable. You could raise the bed up to a comfortable working height to do this skill. No problem. But what do you need to remember to do at the end? Lower it back down. Now, at the end of the skill, you're going to be rushing because you want this done. It's a test. You will probably forget to lower that bed. Be careful if you decide to raise it. You don't have to for the test. All right, Miss Jones, I'm going to raise your arm above your head and back down to the bed like you're asking a question. Please let me know if there's any pain, okay? So we're going to stretch your arm out and we're going to go all the way up and all the way back down. Notice I'm supporting it as I'm moving it slowly. Feel okay? All the way up and all the way back down. That's 2. 1 more. All the way up and all the way back down. Good? Any pain? Okay, now I'm going to bring your arm out to the side and back in like you're making a snow angel. Again, I'm going to support at the joints. So under the elbow and under the wrist, we're going to go all the way up. My wire's in the way. All the way back in, all the way up, and all the way back in, and all the way up. Feel okay? All the way back. All right. Are you comfortable? Would you like a magazine before I go? Okay. Environment is clean. Bed is in the low position. Here's the call light. If you need anything at all, please press that red button. Is there anything else I can get for you before I go? All right. I'm going to open the curtain. And I'm going to go wash my hands. So this whole skill, even with hand washing, did not take 4 minutes. So let's turn the water on, wet our hands, get lots of soap, look at the clock, and start to rub. Tops of the wrists, backs of the hands, between the thumb and index finger, the bottom of my hand by my pinky, and the palm of my hand interlacing my fingers. And that's 20 seconds. I'm going to go down each one of my nails with my thumb, circle my nails on the palm of my hand to get underneath, and then rinse. After rinsing, I'll tap to keep the water in the sink. Get some paper towels, dry what's clean. Throw those away. Clean dry paper towel to turn the faucet off. Throw that away. I'll probably read that care plan one more time just to make sure I did everything correctly. And then I will tell the evaluator my skill is done. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? No? Everybody good? Now, we went through a lot of stuff today, a lot of content. We learned 3 skills, complete skills. We learned about gloves, why you can't just use them for everything. We learned to use a barrier anytime we're using supplies and when to get the barrier. We learned to use a privacy blanket anytime the patient's uncovered or undressed. And we learned a little bit about linen rules. We'll cover some more of that later. So a lot of content today. You may want to watch, you're going to get a wrap-up email. You may want to watch the videos for all of these skills again, because what I taught you 4 hours ago may be a little hazy now because I've shoved more at you. So you might want to go back and review those. Remember, in your book, there's step-by-step instructions for all of these skills. So you're not ever out there on your own. But I do want you to start practicing the skills on friends, family, neighbors, whoever you can, to start getting comfortable with working with other people, with patients. Now I'm going to pass out your review sheets for today, and you do have homework. The homework is you're going to read chapters 2 and 3 in your yellow book. You're going to take the tests on page 182 and 183 in your white book, and you will grade those tests using the answer key on page 201. So we do have a CPR class on Saturday. It is $45. You don't have to pre-register. Just show up the day of class. I will have another one on the last Monday of class, week 4 Monday, which is, I think, the 30th of this month. After that, if you come to CPR, it'll be $55. This Saturday. Yep. You get your certification that day, 9 a.m. It's from 9 to 1. Okay, 9 to 1. So you will also get a wrap-up email today with lots of links and lots of information. I will email you on Friday as well to remind you about the CPR. Okay. And I'm passing out your review sheets. Those of you who are attending online, the review sheets are on flcnatraining.com. You can print out these same review sheets that my students are getting and fill them out. It's a good idea to do this at the end of every single class session while the information is still fresh, and then use these this packet of review sheets as a quick review right before the test. Okay. Next class is Monday at 9 a.m. Any questions? No? Did you guys survive? Yeah. I told you guys I talked for 4 hours nonstop. All right. Have a fantastic weekend. Try to do something fun. And I will see you on Monday. Those of you that joined us online, thank you so much. We will see you on Monday. Happy caregiving.
Have a good day.